Chapter 4080. Currently, Su Zhaohe was regarded as the soaring sky pavilion's genius of 1,000 years, and Shenghuan Tianhua was about to take him in as a disciple, whereas she, Huang Xiaodao, was just a mere clear cloud pavilion disciple without strength or influence. What did she have to contend against the other side? Lin Yi looked at her deeply and said meaningfully, "Captain Xiaodao, if you don't untie this knot in your heart, even if you become a rogue cultivator, you won't be able to live freely." "Perhaps, but what else can I do?" Huang Xiaodao shook her head helplessly and changed the topic. She forced herself to raise her spirits and said to everyone, "Okay, let's stop chatting and get back to business. According to past experience, it will take us 3 days to reach the Hutsai Tianwu mountain. Everyone should rest well. I will be in charge of commanding the spirit bird. If we encounter any danger, I will inform you." Chen Muzhuan and Song Jima were already used to this. After looking at each other, they didn't say anything and closed their eyes to cultivate. "Okay, then I will have to trouble Captain Xiaodao." Lin Yi nodded and didn't ask about the grudge between Huang Xiaodao and Su Zhaohe. He immediately sat down to cultivate. He had just broken through to the peak of the late foundation establishment stage. These 3 days were just the right time to stabilize his cultivation. The journey was smooth. After 3 days, the 4 of them smoothly entered the boundary of the Hutsai Tianwu mountain. As far as the eye could see, it was lush like a primeval forest. The mountains towered into the sky and stretched endlessly. Even compared to the mountains behind the 3 great pavilions, it was not small. There was a mysterious and powerful aura faintly emitting from it. Huang Xiaodao controlled the spirit bird and landed on the edge of the open space. After instructing the spirit bird to rise into the air again, she reminded Lin Yi and the others, "Everyone, be careful. Although we are only in the periphery, we can't rule out the possibility of encountering powerful spirit beasts. If we are careless, we may pay with our lives. Do you understand?" "Understood," Lin Yi and the others replied in unison. "All right, then I'll start assigning tasks now. Junior brother Chen Muzhuan will be in charge of being on guard and keeping watch, and I'll be in charge of restraining the nearby spirit beasts. As for brother Ling Yi, you'll follow junior brother Songjima to gather spirit herbs." Huang Xiaodao instructed. Division of labor and cooperation was the essence of a trial team. The more spiritual herbs a place had, the more spiritual beasts there would be. If there was no one specifically responsible for guarding and restraining the beasts in such a dangerous place, rashly gathering spiritual herbs would simply be courting death. Only when a few people worked together with sincerity would they be able to gather the spiritual herbs and retreat safely. As the team leader, Huang Xiaodao's words carried enormous weight. The 3 of them had no objections and immediately began to busy themselves. In order not to arouse suspicion, Lin Yi did not leave immediately. Instead, he followed them to complete the quest seriously. Hukai Tianwu Mountain was surrounded by the sea on 2 sides and was surrounded by mountains on 2 sides. Adding on the fact that there were few people here, it created an abundance of spiritual herbs. Wealth came from danger. This was why, even though it was extremely dangerous, many trial takers were still willing to come here. By working together, they had already avoided the dangerous areas where the spiritual beasts gathered. The 4 of them passed their first day without any danger. Lin Yi's role was to carry the spiritual herbs and dig them up. There was no skill to speak of. However, he had no complaints. Huang Xiaodao and the others had come to Hukai Tianwu Mountain a few times before, so they had a good understanding of the place. If Lin Yi followed them, he would be able to quickly familiarize himself with the surroundings. The next day, when the sky was bright, the 4 of them continued their division of labor. Based on their previous tacit understanding, Lin Yi thought that it would continue to be peaceful. However, he didn't expect Chen Muzhuan, who was responsible for guarding the top of the tree, to bring them an unexpected piece of news. After Chen Muzhuan gathered everyone, he reported, 10 kilometers ahead, there is a spiritual herb thicket. From a rough estimate, there should be at least 100 spiritual herbs there. Everyone was immediately happy. A spiritual herb thicket with more than 100 spiritual herbs was a rare treasure. As long as they could successfully collect it, they would have completed half of the quest ahead of time. Then, are there any powerful spiritual beasts nearby? Although Huang Xiaodao was happy, she didn't let it get to her head. Chen Muzhuan shook his head and said, "Not yet. According to previous experience, there should be spiritual beasts nearby, but there shouldn't be many. At most, there should be 1 or 2 spiritual beasts. Perhaps they're patrolling the territory right now." Song Jima, who was at the side, nodded in agreement. Right, there shouldn't be too many spiritual beasts. Otherwise, senior apprentice Brother Chun would definitely be able to find some clues. If there are only 1 or 2 spiritual beasts, then it would be like sending spiritual herbs to your doorstep. Captain Xiaodao. Seeing everyone looking at her eagerly, Huang Xiaodao didn't hesitate for too long. She immediately said, "Okay, we can't miss this opportunity. Since we found it, let's gamble." Junior apprentice Brother Chen Muzhuan, you go from the top and carefully monitor the surroundings. Junior apprentice Brother Song Jima and Brother Ling, you two go collect spiritual herbs. I'll be on the side to keep watch for you and restrain any spiritual beast that might appear. Okay. Everyone responded in unison and began to move without saying anything else. Without saying anything, Lin Yi and Song Jima quickly approached the location that Chen Muzhuan had pointed out. What made Lin Yi secretly surprised was that along the way, not to mention powerful spiritual beasts, they didn't even see a small wild beast. This situation was a bit strange. If it was just Lin Yi moving alone with his cautious style, he would first find a place with a wide field of view and observe for a while. However, this was a team operation and Lin Yi was only a temporary outsider. He didn't have the right to say anything, so he could only increase his vigilance and continue to follow them. Soon, Song Jima and Lin Yi arrived at the spiritual herb thicket. Looking around, there were all kinds of high-quality spiritual herbs in front of them. It was as if they were cabbages that didn't cost anything. Brother Ling Yi, we've struck it rich this time. Song Jima couldn't help but swallow his saliva. As long as they collected all of these spiritual herbs, even if they couldn't complete the mission, they would still be able to sell these spiritual herbs for at least 1,000 spiritual jades. If they split it evenly, they would have at least 200 to 300 spiritual jades. This was a huge sum of money. With that, Song Jima hurried to start harvesting. Lin Yi, on the other hand, wasn't as impatient as Song Jima. He looked around calmly. Suddenly, under the shade of a tree not far from the spiritual herb thicket, a strangely shaped fruit tree attracted Lin Yi's attention. Chapter 4081. The deformity of the fruit tree was one thing, but what really caught Lin Yi's attention were the 5 dazzling golden fruits at the top of the tree. Even under the shade of the tree, they seemed to be shining with a frightening light. Brother Ling Yi, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and pick the herbs. Although we have Senior Chun on guard and Captain Xiaodao to control the spirit beast, we still have to move quickly. If we attract some powerful spirit beast, then all our efforts will be in vain. Song Jima noticed that Lin Yi was in a daze and immediately urged him. However, when he noticed that Lin Yi was looking at the strange tree, he was also stunned and couldn't move his eyes away for a long time. After a long time, Song Jima finally reacted while gasping for breath. He pointed at the 5 shining fruits at the top of the tree and stammered, Could this be the legendary myriad crossing? Golden core fruit? 10,000 crossing golden dan fruit? Lin Yi was slightly stunned. He had never heard of this name before. However, from Song Jima's expression of surprise, it should be some kind of high-level spiritual medicine. Chen Muzhuan, who was responsible for monitoring the tree, noticed the strange behavior of the 2 people. A strange look suddenly flashed through his eyes, and he immediately jumped down from the tree. However, when his gaze fell on the 5 fruits, his greed was still overflowing. Soon after, Huang Xiaodao, who was wandering around, noticed that something was wrong and approached the 3 people. After seeing the 5 golden Dan-shaped fruits, her body suddenly seemed to be struck by lightning and couldn't move. 10,000 crossing golden Dan fruit? Is this really the 10,000 crossing golden Dan fruit? Junior Tsongjima, I remember that you studied in the spirit medicine nursery for a period of time. Are you sure? Huang Xiaodao said with a face of disbelief. Captain Xiaodao, I guarantee with my head that these 5 fruits are definitely the 10,000 crossing golden Dan fruit. As long as a golden core stage expert consumes it, they can directly raise their level by 1 level. If a foundation establishment stage expert consumes it, they will definitely succeed in forming their core. This is a truly priceless and rare treasure. Song Jima swallowed his saliva and said. This time, even Lin Yi was shocked. A golden core stage expert could directly raise their level, and a foundation establishment stage expert could guarantee a 100% success in forming their core. There was actually such a heaven-defying spiritual medicine in this world. After a while, Huang Xiaodao suppressed the excitement in her heart with great difficulty and said to the others, "This is a great opportunity that we may not even have in our next life. Let's split these 10,000 crossing golden core fruits." Okay. Chen Mujuan and Song Jima hurriedly agreed. As for Lin Yi, he didn't have any objections. But there are 10,000 crossing golden Dan fruits here, but there are only 4 of us. It won't be easy to divide them, right? On the way here, Lin Yi had learned that in Huang Xiaotao's team, other than the contribution points going to the captain, the rewards were split equally among the team members. It could be considered a very kind and honest team. Song Jima retorted, "What's so difficult about that? Everyone who sees it has a share. The 4 of us will each get 1, and the extra 1 will naturally belong to Captain Xiaodao. She's been taking care of us for such a long time, and she's even the team leader. If it were any other team, she would definitely get the biggest share." This Song Jima is a kind person. Lin Yi secretly nodded. He said, "I have no objections." Chun Muzhua looked like he was struggling, but since Song Jima and Lin Yi had already expressed their stance, he was the only one left. Even if he objected, it would be useless. They could only nod along, but there was a hint of haze in their eyes, as if their scheme had succeeded. If that's the case, I'll shamelessly take this universal golden pill fruit. Huang Xiaotao suppressed the joy in her heart and immediately said, "In order to make up for everyone's losses, I will distribute my share of the rewards for this and the next few missions to everyone." After the 4 of them finished their discussion, they immediately picked the 5 universal golden pill fruits and put them into their respective bags excitedly. Every one of them couldn't calm down. At this moment, something strange happened. The jade pendant suddenly gave a warning, and Lin Yi's eyelids twitched. With his current perception, he could clearly feel the aura of 5 powerful spirit beasts rapidly converging on their position from all directions. From the looks of it, it should have been premeditated. They were surrounded. Just as Lin Yi thought to himself that this was indeed a trap, the ghost that hadn't appeared for a long time spoke. "Young Lin, you're thinking too much. This isn't a trap." Looking at them, they must have discussed that they would only come to pick the universal golden pill fruit after it fully ripened. Therefore, while they were waiting nearby, they also cleared the area. However, they didn't expect you guys to snatch it in advance. I see. Listening to the ghost's words, Lin Yi could not help but perspire. It turned out that this wasn't a trap at all, but the 5 spirit beasts had already discussed the ownership of the fruits. They probably calculated that each spirit beast would get 1 fruit. On the other hand, Lin Yi and the rest were suspected of burglary. However, there was no such thing as first come, first served for heaven's treasures. According to the law of nature, it had always belonged to the strong. Regardless of whether it was Lin Yi or Huang Xiaotao, none of them would be so noble as to give away the universal golden pill fruit that they had obtained. Suddenly realizing that the universal golden pill fruit that they had coveted for a long time had been snatched away, the 5 high-level spirit beasts were instantly enraged and charged toward Lin Yi and the rest from all directions. At this moment, apart from Lin Yi, The rest of them had not noticed anything at all. They were still immersed in the ecstasy of picking up a precious treasure and could not extricate themselves. Should I remind them a little? He hesitated for a moment. Although these people were only temporary companions, he did not want them to die in the spirit beast's mouths just like that. However, before He could speak, Huang Xiaodao's expression suddenly froze. She quickly silenced everyone and said sternly, "Something's not right. I feel that something's coming, and it's not just one. Everyone, be careful, I'll go take a look." Then, right in front of Yi and the rest, Huang Xiaotao's figure gradually disappeared into the air at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was as if she had evaporated into thin air, causing Yi to be dumbfounded. Song Jima explained, "This is a very high-end forest concealment skill. As long as you're in the forest, you can hide yourself perfectly. Brother Yi, don't be fooled by the fact that our leader is a woman. She's very powerful." Forest concealment skill? This is my first time seeing it. Yi nodded thoughtfully. Chapter 4082. Song Jima and Chun Muzhuang were on full alert, while Yi chose to climb a tree. With a wide field of vision and his powerful perception, he could perfectly grasp the movements of every blade of grass and tree in his surroundings. The 5 high-grade spirit beasts were getting closer and closer. Just as he was about to help everyone get rid of one of them, an incomparably fierce vital energy suddenly erupted from the north. He fixed his eyes on it. He realized that it was Huang Xiaodao who had made her move. A 1-meter-long black arrow was propelled by a powerful burst of vital energy. Its speed was as fast as a black bolt of lightning. In the blink of an eye, it crossed a distance of 300 meters and struck the throat of one of the attacking spirit beasts. Even for high-grade spirit beasts, the throat was an extremely vulnerable and fatal area. No matter how strong and heaven-defying its vitality was, it would undoubtedly die after being pierced through the throat by an arrow. Without any suspense, a high-grade spirit beast was easily killed by Huang Xiaodao with a single arrow. I didn't expect her to be a rare expert in archery. It seems that Song Jima's evaluation wasn't exaggerated. Captain Xiaodao is indeed worthy of the word very strong. He praised her in his heart. The combination of the forest concealment technique and such a superb archery technique with extremely high lethality was simply an invincible and tyrannical combination of martial skills in the deep mountains and dense forests. However, judging from Huang Xiaotao's current panting expression, the astonishing consumption of the arrow just now was far from what it looked like on the surface. It was likely that this was her trump card, a powerful technique. "Everyone, be careful. They're coming." Huang Xiaodao shouted behind her with all her might. Without bothering to catch her breath and adjust, she immediately set her sights on another high-grade spirit beast. After one of the 5 high-grade spirit beasts was killed by her long-range sniper rifle, the remaining situation was exactly 1 person against 1 spirit beast each. However, the spirit beast that she had just killed was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. It was the weakest among the 5 spirit beasts. As for the remaining 4 spirit beasts, each of them was much stronger than it. 2 were at the late stage of the foundation building realm, and 2 were at the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Putting aside Yi, who had concealed his strength, for Huang Xiaodao and the other 2, these 4 high-level spiritual beasts were like the king of hell. Huang Xiaodao took the initiative to target one of the ferocious spirit beasts in the late stage of the foundation establishment realm. It was very difficult for human cultivators to be a match for spirit beasts of the same level, but for Huang Xiaodao, who possessed the forest concealment technique and powerful archery skills, this dense forest was also her home ground. She might be able to put up a fight. In comparison, Song Jima and Chun Muzhuang's situation was much more difficult than Huang Xiaodao's. At the moment, they were facing 2 spirit beasts at the peak of the foundation establishment realm, which were at the intermediate stage of the foundation establishment realm. One could imagine how much pressure they were under. As for Yi, who was currently on the tree, he was being targeted by a huge thousand-eyed spider. This powerful late-stage Foundation establishment spirit beast was covered in densely packed eyes from its head to its abdomen. Each of these eyes could shoot out a terrifying ray of light that was enough to harm the primordial spirit. Coupled with the huge web that it rapidly weaved, this was a typical killer of the jungle. After targeting Lin E, the thousand-eyed spider did not immediately launch a fatal attack. Instead, it would shoot out a ray of light from time to time to restrain Lin E, and at the same time, it would circle back and forth around Lin E. After a short while, Lin E was shocked to discover that he was surrounded by dense spider webs in all directions. He had actually been completely trapped by the dense spider webs in the sky and on the ground. From a distance, it looked like he was wrapped in a huge cocoon. There was no way out of the sky, no way out of the earth. There was nowhere to run, even if he wanted to. Screech! The sharp and unpleasant cry of the thousand-eyed spider clearly revealed an indescribable sense of pride. At this moment, in its eyes, Lin E was just a delicacy that had been placed on the table, a helpless lamb waiting to die. Hee, a mere spider dares to be so arrogant. It seems that you really haven't seen much of the world. You've wasted so many eyes. Lin E stood in the middle and smiled unhurriedly. Screech, screech, screech. The thousand-eyed spider understood Lin Yi's mockery and immediately opened all the eyes on its body. Hundreds and thousands of terrifying rays of light interweaved to form a dense, life-threatening web that shot towards Lin E. At the same time, everyone below fell into a bloody and bitter battle. Huang Xiaotao's situation was slightly better. Her forest concealment technique was enough to protect herself. But even so, with the frightening intuition of a late-stage Foundation establishment spirit beast, she was almost caught by it several times. Huang Xiaotao was surrounded by danger several times, but she barely escaped. As for Cong Jima and Chen Muzhuan, their situation was even more miserable. They were two mid-stage Foundation establishment experts, but they had to deal with two spirit beasts at the peak of the mid-stage Foundation establishment. This was simply an impossible task. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were wounded. Fortunately, the two of them had a tacit understanding and maintained a defensive formation with their backs against each other. They didn't seek to kill the two spirit beasts, but only sought to protect themselves. However, this defensive strategy could only allow them to delay for a little longer. Every time the spirit beasts pounced on them, they would leave a wound on them. If this continued, even if they weren't bitten to death by the spirit beasts, they would bleed from the wounds on their bodies until they turned into dried corpses. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Huang Xiaotao, as the team leader, finally didn't dare to delay any longer. If this continued, everyone except her would die here today. I can only take a risk. Huang Xiaotao clenched her teeth. After a few confrontations, the forest blood wolf, which was at the peak of the late-stage Foundation establishment, had begun to adapt to her tactics. Every time Huang Xiaotao wanted to raise her hand to shoot an arrow, the forest blood wolf would always be able to retreat in advance even when it was in a state of concealment. Furthermore, it was extremely proficient in running like a snake, so Huang Xiaotao couldn't lock onto it at all. Once again, Huang Xiaotao entered a state of concealment. The forest blood wolf was carefully on guard against any movement in its surroundings. Although it wasn't like Lin E, who could roughly capture Huang Xiaotao's position through its senses, it had a far sharper sense of smell and hearing than humans. If Huang Xiaotao was careless and stepped on any flowers or grass, it would be a fatal flaw. Suddenly, the forest blood wolf made a move after hearing a slight rustling sound. If it was not absolutely confident, with its patience and cunning, it would not easily attack. However, this time, it had already grasped the weakness of the human opposite it. Chapter 4083. With Huang Xiaotao's frail body, this claw alone was enough to seriously injure her. However, the forest blood wolf did not choose to chase after her. Instead, it froze on the spot. Unknowingly, a black arrow had pierced through its neck. After a while, the The forest blood wolf fell straight to the ground. It struggled and howled for a long time before finally losing all signs of life. Phew! Huang Xiaodao let out a long sigh of relief. If she had not taken a risk to lure the opponent over with the forest blood wolf's cunning, it would have been hard to say who would have the last laugh. Fortunately, she had smeared a lethal poison on the arrow. Otherwise, even if the arrow had successfully pierced through the forest blood wolf's body, it would not have died due to its thick skin and flesh. After killing the forest blood wolf, Huang Xiaodao did not stop at all. She did not even have time to catch her breath as she turned around and rushed towards Song Jima and Chen Muzhuang. If she had delayed any longer, they might have died. That was the truth. When Huang Xiaodao arrived, Song Jima and Chen Muzhuang were already in a precarious situation. Not only were they covered in wounds, but they could not even stand properly. On the other hand, the two spirit beasts at the peak of the Foundation Establishment intermediate stage were still alive and kicking. However, with the addition of Huang Xiaodao, the situation was instantly reversed. In less than the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the two Foundation building middle-stage spiritual beasts were killed by the three of them. Lying on the ground in a sorry state, Song Jima panted heavily as he applied medicine. He looked at the giant cocoon made of spider silk above his head and said worriedly, "Brother Ling, he has been up there for so long. Will something happen to him? I'll go up and take a look." Huang Xiaodao did not care about the pain in her body or her remaining strength. She gritted her teeth and prepared to climb up the tree. For what she remembered, the spirit beast that had its eyes on Lin Yi seemed to be a thousand-eyed spider, a spirit beast that was even stronger than the forest bloodwolves. Ling Yi, on the other hand, was the weakest of the group, and he had been fighting the thousand-eyed spider one-on-one for so long. He had faced the thousand-eyed spider one-on-one for so long. Huang Xiaodao knew the danger of rushing up so recklessly. However, even if there was only a slim chance of survival, as the team leader, she could not leave Ling Yi in the lurch. However, just as Huang Xiaodao got up to climb the tree, she stared at the giant cocoon, and suddenly, flames shot out in all directions. Then, the giant cocoon quickly turned into ashes in the fire and scattered with the wind. Lin Yi then appeared and jumped down from the sky. Song Jima looked at Lin Yi, who was in a rather sorry state but had no obvious injuries, and said with a dumbfounded expression, "Brother Ling Yi, what are you doing? You're really amazing. The one you're eyeing seems to be the thousand-eyed spider, right? That's a spirit beast in the late stage of the Foundation Establishment stage, and you can even deal with it." Not only him, but Huang Xiaodao and Chen Muzhua were also looking at Lin Yi with obvious shock in their eyes. They had always thought that Lin Yi was the weakest among them. Haha, it's just that I happen to know a fire attribute martial technique. Its spider web is just a trap of its own making. It was purely luck. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to deal with it. Lin Yi smiled modestly. So that's how it is. Fire does seem to restrain spiders. Brother Ling Yi, you're really lucky. However, don't be so humble. Luck is also a kind of strength. Song Jima and the other two came to a sudden realization. Lin Yi secretly smiled. It was true that fire countered spiders, but at the late stage of the Foundation Establishment stage, if one didn't have enough strength, it would be useless. No matter how much you tried to restrain yourself, it was all in vain. The thousand-eyed spider could kill you with just a few rays of light. With Lin Yi's strength, dealing with this thousand-eyed spider was as easy as beating a dog. If he hadn't intentionally hidden his strength and delayed it, he would have been able to kill this stinky spider in one move. He wouldn't have dragged it until now. Of course, if Song Jima and Chen Muzhua were really in mortal danger, Lin Yi would have no choice but to give up on hiding his strength and help them out. Of course, if Song Jima and Chen Muzhua were in mortal danger, Lin Yi would have no choice but to give up on hiding his strength and help them out. All right, it's already a blessing that everyone managed to survive today. This place has already been cleared by the 5 spirit beasts, so this should be the safest place for now. Let's take a good rest here first. We'll continue after we've more or less recovered, Huang Xiaodao ordered. Just as everyone was about to respond, three figures suddenly descended from the sky. They all had sinister smiles on their faces as they landed in front of everyone. Sweeping a glance at the three people who obviously had bad intentions, Lin raised his head and looked up. Sure enough, he saw a flying spiritual beast circling in the sky. If the other party hadn't come from the sky, they wouldn't have been able to escape his perception. TSK, why are you all so heavily injured? It must have been hard on you guys. Come on, hurry up and hand over the myriad crossing golden dan fruit. I don't need to search it myself, right? The person in the lead was a frivolous and arrogant youth. He raised his eyebrows a Huang Xiaotao and sneered. Su Zhaohu, you're despicable and shameless. Huang Xiaotao finally reacted. Even though her face couldn't be seen through the mask, her current emotions could be felt from her trembling body. Shameless? Is this your first day out on a mission? This place has always been a place where only the capable can get what they want. If you don't want to die here, be tactful and hand over the myriad crossing golden dan fruit. Su Zhaohu laughed complacently and looked Huang Xiaotao up and down playfully. Huang Xiaotao, if you had become my sick sister-in-law back then, would you have ended up like this? Women are all cheap. Serves you right. Not only did you get disfigured, you're also in such a miserable state. TSK. You. Huang Xiaotao gritted her teeth in humiliation. If she hadn't fought the 5 spiritual beasts to the point where both sides were injured, she wouldn't have needed to fear Su Zhaohu. However, now that he had taken advantage of her misfortune, it was too late to say anything. You really don't want to hand it over? Then I won't hold back. Su Zhaohu sneered maliciously. Huang Xiaotao was once hailed as a cultivation genius. To be honest, he didn't dare to look down on this woman. However, everything was now in his grasp. Seeing that Su Zhaohu was about to make a move, Huang Xiaotao had no choice but to grit her teeth and hand over the 2 myriad crossing golden dan fruits. Hee, that's more like it. Su Zhaohu snatched the 2 myriad crossing golden dan fruits and drooled greedily. At the same time, the 2 people who had appeared with him also began to force the crowd to hand over the myriad crossing golden dan fruits. Chapter 4084. Hearing this, Huang Xiaotao and Song Jima were shocked. They were still wondering why they were so unlucky to meet Su Zhaohu at this time. They didn't expect Chen Muzhuan to be the mole. Chen Muzhuan, you traitorous dog. How can you face Captain Xiaotao like this? You. Song Jima angrily cursed. However, he was immediately kicked to the side by Su Zhaohu. Huang Xiaotao quickly chased after him and helped him to the side. Get it to you? You wish. There are only 10,000 crossing golden dan fruit. The 3 of us have to each have one. In addition, I have to give my 6th cousin too. He is about to become a disciple of Pavilion Master Shangwan. At that time, he will need to please Princess Shangwan Laner. Naturally, I have to give her one. How can 4 be enough? Don't talk nonsense. Quickly hand it over. Su Zhaohu turned hostile. Hearing this, Lin Yi, as an outsider, completely understood the other party's identity. This Su Zhaohu was the cousin of the Soaring Sky Pavilion's Millennium Genius, Su Zhaohe. No wonder he dared to be so arrogant. This kind of scum was exactly the same as Meng Tong back then. He dared to use his connections to intimidate others, thinking that he was already a cut above others. Little did he know that in the eyes of others, he was nothing more than a clown who was not even worth a fart. You deserve it. Song Jima fiercely spat at Chen Muzhuan. He originally thought of the other party as a good brother that he could entrust his life to. He didn't expect the other party to be such a scum. Although Su Zhaohu was not a good person, seeing a traitor being betrayed was a very satisfying feeling. Senior brother Su, Chen Muzhuan never thought that Su Zhaohu would burn the bridge after crossing it. He ignored his conscience and became a mole, causing him to be deserted. In the end, he didn't even get a single 10,000 crossing golden dan fruit. Wasn't his brain filled with water? You? If you keep wasting time with me, believe it or not, I will kill you right now. Su Zhaohu fiercely stared at him with a murderous aura. No matter how good a treasure was, one must be alive to enjoy it. In desperation, Chen Muzhuang could only take out the universal golden pill fruit dejectedly, but it was snatched away by Su Zhaohu. TSK, this is a treasure that no amount of spiritual jade can buy. With this treasure as a stepping stone, my sixth cousin brother will be able to become Pavilion Master Shangwan's disciple. Who knows, I might even be able to marry Miss Shangwan as well, and become Pavilion Master Shangwan's grandson-in-law. As Su Zhaohu spoke, he glanced at Huang Xiaodao mockingly and sneered complacently. Huang Xiaodao, you're just a piece of trash. To be able to catch my big brother's eye, that's already a rare honor. Yet he's still unwilling? Ha ha! Are you regretting it now? Unfortunately, it's useless. You're just an ugly monster with a disfigured face. Not only my brother doesn't want you, any random cat or dog on the street wouldn't want you either. Huang Xiaodao was angered to the point she gritted her teeth, yet she didn't retort. Rather than arguing with this kind of arrogant scum who only knew how to use his connections to intimidate others, it was better to save some energy. At this time, the other person brought by Su Zhaohu walked in front of Lin Yi and said with a disdainful expression, "Is there a hole in your brain? After talking for so long, why don't you hurry up and hand over the universal golden pill fruit? You're courting death. Don't you know how to use your brain? Is such a treasure something a country bumpkin like you can have?" Linny glanced at him and smiled, unmoved. He said indifferently, "A bunch of trash. Now put down the universal golden pill fruit. Hurry up and scram. I can still leave you a way out." Huh? This person turned his head and looked at Su Zhaohu. As if he had heard the funniest joke in the world, he suddenly laughed maniacally. He pointed at Lin Yi and said breathlessly, "Oh, looking at your appearance, I thought you were a country bumpkin. I didn't expect you to be such a tough guy. Ha, that's pretty cool. Unfortunately, in front of me, a late-stage foundation establishment expert. Who do you think you are? So you don't want to hand it over. All right then, I'll reluctantly fulfill your wish." As soon as Lin Yi finished speaking, he suddenly raised his hand and used the 29 forms of Frenzied Fire Fist. Boom! This person didn't even have a chance to react. His wild laughter stopped abruptly, and his head was directly smashed into pieces. Only a headless corpse was left, slowly falling down. Until his death, he didn't understand how he died in the hands of such a country bumpkin. This sudden turn of events shocked everyone present, and they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. They all looked at Lin Yi with shock in their eyes. Huang Xiaodao and Song Jima were scared silly. They had always thought that Lin Yi was the weakest. Previously, they had always made Lin Yi carry the elixirs for them and boasted that they had taken good care of Lin Yi. Now that they thought about it, they couldn't help but blush. It was so funny that they couldn't show their faces. A late-stage foundation establishment expert could be killed by a casual punch from Lin Yi without the slightest bit of resistance. What a terrifying and powerful strength. You're a golden core stage senior? The other subordinate that Su Zhaohu brought was so scared that he peed his pants on the spot when he saw this brutal scene. Su Zhaohu was also scared to the point that his face turned pale. It was clearly a flawless plan, and the myriad golden dan fruit was already in their hands. Who would have thought that they would suddenly kick an iron plate, and such a devil incarnate would appear? Although he was terrified, he looked at the myriad golden dan fruit in his hand unwillingly. Suddenly, Su Zhaohu shouted with a ferocious expression, "No, he's definitely not. At most, he's at the peak of the late-stage foundation establishment. Let's attack together. I don't believe that we can't kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Zhaohu braced himself and stepped forward. The subordinate who was scared to the point of peeing did not dare to fall behind. There was no reason for him to give up the myriad golden dan fruit that was already in his hands. He immediately roared and charged at Lin Yi. "Be careful!" Huang Xiaodao and Song Jima hurriedly warned. The shock brought by the bloody scene just now had not been completely digested. They subconsciously felt that no matter how strong Lin Yi was, it would be difficult for him to be a match for Su Zhaohu and Song Jima. However, before the two of them finished speaking, Lin Yi stood still without dodging. With a calm expression, He raised his hand and used a frenzy 8-trigram palm. Accompanied by a loud bang, Su Zhaohu's subordinate was sent flying into the air and crashed into several trees. When he finally fell to the ground, his body was shockingly full of bumps and hollows. Not to mention his life, even his corpse had been beaten beyond recognition. Chapter 4085. Kowtowing to Lin Yi repeatedly, Su Zhaohu hurriedly begged for mercy. Senior in the gold core stage, please spare my life. I have eyes but failed to recognize you. I won't do it again. Please be generous and forgive me this time. Then, I don't want a myriad crossing Jinan fruit anymore. I'll give it all to you. As Su Zhao's cousin, Su Zhaohu had seen a lot of things. Lin Yi's 29 moves of Raging Fire Fist only had the power of the Foundation Establishment stage. But this palm was clearly the power of the early stage of the Gold Core stage. Only the masters of the Gold Core stage could master the martial arts skills of the Gold Core stage. This was beyond doubt. No matter how arrogant Su Zhaohu was, he would never dare to be presumptuous in front of a master of the Gold Core stage. Even his genius cousin was only at the peak of the Foundation Establishment stage. You want me to let you go? Lin Yi lightly raised his eyelids. Well, I know I'm wrong. I won't dare to do it again. You are a superior senior in the Gold Core stage. It's not worth dirtying your hands to kill me. Su Zhaohu knelt on the ground without a care for his image, begging for mercy with tears and snot. You also said that you're a villain. You want me to let you go, and then ask your sixth cousin to kill me, right? Lin Yi curled the corner of his mouth playfully. No, I would never dare to do that. You are a senior in the Gold Core stage. Even my cousin is absolutely no match for you. Su Zhaohu hurriedly kowtowed in panic. Lin Yi snorted coldly and ignored his begging for mercy. He turned to look at Chunmu Zhuang on the other side and said, Chunmu Zhuang, you just said that these people were all brought here by you? Chunmu Zhuang had long been scared out of his wits. He was stunned for a long time before he came to his senses. He also knelt to Lin Yi and begged for mercy. Senior, please spare my life. They forced me to do this. If I don't do as they say, I can't survive in the North Island at all. I will be hunted by them. I'll give you a chance. Kill him. Lin Yi ordered expressionlessly. Chen Muzhu and Su Zhaohu were both startled. Su Zhaohu's face was filled with fear, while Chen Muzhu hesitated. He wasn't soft-hearted. Just now, Su Zhaohu burned the bridge after crossing the river. In his heart, he had already killed this bastard 1,000 times. But Su Zhaohu was Su Zhao's cousin. If he, Chen Muzhuan, dared to kill Su Zhaohu, even if he could survive today, he would definitely die when he returned to the North Island. Chen Muzhuan, you dare. If you dare to touch a single hair of mine, I'll make sure you die without a complete corpse. Su Zhaohu was both shocked and furious as he threatened. Chen Muzhua's heart trembled, but when he saw Lin Yi's sharp gaze sweep over, he quickly got up and braced himself to attack Su Zhaohu. If he killed Su Zhaohu, he would only be hunted down in the future. But if he didn't kill Su Zhaohu, he would die now. He had no other choice. Seeing Chen Muzhu's murderous intent gathering, Su Zhaohu finally didn't dare to waste any more time. Before Chen Muzhu could attack him, he suddenly pierced his opponent's heart with one finger, killing him instantly. However, before he could relax, Lin Yi sneered and said, In front of me, you dared to kill a member of my squad. You just said that you wouldn't dare to do it again. Are you fucking lying to me? No. Su Zhaohu quickly wanted to deny it, but Lin Yi didn't give him a chance. He lifted his leg and used a frenzy 1,000 kicks. One kick sent Su Zhaohu flying dozens of feet. When Su Zhaohu fell heavily on a tree trunk, he had already become a mutilated corpse. Frenzy 1,000 kicks. This was a new martial technique that Lin Yi had recently combined. After all, Meng Tan's 1,000 kicks were not weak. Moreover, after cultivating it, it could increase the speed of one's movement technique. Now that it had evolved into a frenzy 1,000 kicks in Lin Yi's hands, it was considered an extremely practical martial technique. Say, Senior, I'm sorry before. Seeing Lin Yi's gaze fall on them, Huang Xiaotao and Song Jima were immediately scared out of their wits. He killed so many people in such a short period of time. This person simply killed without batting an eye. Although the two of them didn't do anything wrong to Lin Yi, letting a golden core expert do hard labor was in itself a fatal mistake. According to this person's terrifying, murderous nature, it wasn't impossible for him to kill the two of them if he was unhappy. All right, you two don't have to be afraid. Get up. Lin Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head. In fact, he really wasn't this kind of ruthless person who killed without batting an eye. It was just that he was about to reach the golden core realm, and the myriad golden Dan fruit today was too important to him. Moreover, in the past 6 months in the Welcome Pavilion, he was restricted by all kinds of rules. He also had to take into account the background of his opponents. He couldn't kill this person, he couldn't provoke that person, and he had to be cautious when doing things. It really made him feel suffocated. Now that he was outside, how could he not kill this kind of ignorant scum? Seeing that Lin Yi really didn't intend to pursue the matter, Huang Xiaodao supported Song Jima and stood up carefully. However, her gaze towards Lin Yi was still full of awe, and she didn't dare to approach him. Lin Yi shook his head helplessly and said to the two of them, "This task ends here. We should also go our separate ways. You two take care." Since his strength had been exposed, Lin Yi simply couldn't be bothered to go with them to collect those elixirs. Finding the aspect-growing mushrooms was his ultimate goal. Moreover, looking at the situation, even if he was willing to go with the two of them, the atmosphere would definitely be very awkward. It was better to go their separate ways. This myriad golden Dan fruit. Huang Xiaodao was a little embarrassed. Although she really wanted the myriad golden Dan fruit, logically speaking, these were all things that Lin Yi had snatched from Su Zhaohu's hands, so they belonged to Lin Yi. It had nothing to do with her and Song Jima. Lin Yi smiled and threw 2 of the myriad golden Dan fruits that he had retrieved from Su Zhaohu and the others to Huang Xiaodao and Song Jima. He said, "I want 3, 1 for each of you. Do you have any objections?" Huang Xiaodao and Song Jima were instantly overjoyed. They thanked him profusely. No. Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior. No need. This is what you deserve." Lin Yi lightly waved his hand. Huang Xiaodao and Song Jima looked at each other. They mustered up their courage and said, "We will never forget Senior's great kindness. Now that our task is almost complete, we don't have enough manpower. Moreover, both of us are seriously injured, so we are preparing to return now. However, this will bring the spiritual bird with us. What do you plan to do, Senior?" Chapter 4086. It's all right. You don't have to worry about me. I have a map in my hands. We can return without flying spirit beasts. Lin Yi shook his head. Apart from searching for the life mushroom, his other goal was to make a breakthrough. If he returned with flying spirit beasts, it would be ineffective. Then, all right, Senior, we'll return first. If you need anything in the future, you can look for me at the Blue Cloud Pavilion. We'll definitely go through fire and water for you. Huang Xiaodao immediately whistled to the sky, summoning the spirit bird that was circling above her. Then, she supported Song Jima and was about to leave. However, at this moment, Lin Yi suddenly extended his hand and stopped them. He said with a serious expression, "Wait." Huang Xiaodao and the young man were shocked and couldn't help but feel terrified. They thought that Lin Yi was going to change his mind and was going to take back the myriad golden pill fruit in their hands. However, they heard Lin Yi say, "Someone is coming. Don't take off first. Run in this direction for a while before leaving. I'll stay here and cover for you." The Jade was already warning him, and Lin Yi could sense an extremely strong aura rapidly approaching them. If Huang Xiaodao were to take off now, she'd be too obvious a target, and it'd be easy for someone to target her. Huang Xiaodao and the young man then realized that they had misunderstood Lin Yi and felt extremely guilty. However, when they saw Lin Yi's serious expression, they knew that the situation was urgent. They didn't say anything else and quickly left with the spirit bird after telling him to be careful. After watching Huang Xiaodao and the young man leave, Lin Yi stayed where he was and continued to wait. Judging from the other party's obvious intentions, he had a hunch that the other party was also here for the myriad golden pill fruit. Soon, a middle-aged man who maintained his appearance as if he was in his 40s appeared above Lin Yi's head on a flying spirit beast. After looking at the situation on the ground, he immediately descended from the sky and landed in front of Lin Yi. The middle-aged man looked at Lin Yi coldly and said playfully, "The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind." He said playfully, "The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. I didn't expect a little sparrow like you to get ahead of me. What are you waiting for? Take it out quickly. What is it?" Lin Yi pretended to be at a loss. "Humph, a mere late-stage foundation establishment cultivator dares to play tricks on me? Fine, then you don't have to take it. When you're dead, I'll personally search your body for it." After the middle-aged man finished speaking, his aura skyrocketed. In an instant, it became even more horrifying and violent. Lin Yi was instantly shocked. Judging from this aura, the strength of this middle-aged man in front of him was at least a golden core intermediate stage expert. Lin Yi originally thought that those who came to Hutsai Tianwu Mountain for a trial mission would at most be experts at the peak of Foundation establishment. It was unlikely that they would meet any Golden Core experts. After all, which Golden Core expert would lower himself to come to a place like this to collect spiritual herbs? But he didn't expect. Now, not only did he encounter a Golden Core stage expert, but he was also in the middle stage of the Golden Core stage. This was an unprecedentedly strong enemy. While Lin Yi was still in shock, the middle-aged man had already made his move. With a casual wave of his hand, a ferocious giant claw condensed from true qi suddenly appeared above Lin Yi's head without warning. If Lin Yi hadn't reacted fast enough and used all his strength to activate the butterfly subtle steps, he would have escaped in the nick of time. Just this claw alone could seriously injure him. It was not impossible for it to kill him in one blow. A Golden Core intermediate stage expert was really not to be trifled with. Lin Yi's heart was in awe. However, before he could heave a sigh of relief, another two ferocious giant claws enveloped him, accompanied by the middle-aged man's sneer. "A mere late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. To be able to escape my claw, you're not bad. Unfortunately, you still can't escape death today." The two giant claws surrounded him from left and right, not giving Lin Yi a chance to react and dodge again. Even if he used the butterfly subtle steps, he couldn't completely dodge this time. Blindly escaping would only lead to death. In desperation, Lin Yi had no choice but to brace himself and choose to face it head-on. 28 styles of raging fire, 8 trigrams palm. Choosing one of the ferocious giant claws, Lin Yi clenched his teeth and fiercely struck out with his palm. At the same time, his figure followed closely behind, ready to wait for an opportunity to break out. This was already the strongest martial art he had mastered at the moment. If even this couldn't break the opponent's giant claws, then it would really be dangerous today. Boom! The raging fire, 8 trigrams palm, hit the giant claws head-on, without any suspense. The incomparably brutal, true qi madly collided, instantly setting off a terrifying storm. The vegetation within a radius of 100 feet was all flattened and swept up into the sky by the storm caused by the powerful true qi. For a moment, the sky was covered, as if the end of the world had come. Unexpectedly, the power is no less than that of the early-stage gold core. "Kid, where did you come from?" The middle-aged man couldn't help but frown. An ordinary late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator wouldn't even have a complete corpse, let alone contend with his giant claws. The kid in front of him was a complete anomaly. However, even with the powerful power comparable to that of the early-stage gold core, compared to a real mid-stage gold core master, there was still a big gap. They were not on the same level at all. Bang! Amidst the chaos, Lin Yi's figure flew out like an arrow, and he spat out a mouthful of dazzling and captivating red blood out of thin air. In a single move, he'd shockingly suffered a heavy internal injury. The 28th move of the Raging Fire 8 Trigram's palm was unable to block the opponent's savage giant claws in the end, and in the end, it was only able to offset a portion of the opponent's power. Although Lin Yi wasn't killed directly, his internal organs had already been shaken to the point of shifting, and his stomach was like a raging sea. His situation was worrying. "Oh, you're actually not dead? Kid, you've really made me look at you in a new light." A mere late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, being able to hold on to this extent, you could be considered to be a rare genius figure. But unfortunately, I've never known how to cherish geniuses. What's even more embarrassing is that my greatest hobby is to strangle you so-called geniuses. The middle-aged man laughed coldly without end. As he spoke, the middle-aged man's expression abruptly became extremely ghastly and cruel, and out of thin air, another two savage giant claws struck out of thin air. This time, Lin even faintly heard a roar that seemed to come from an ancient, ferocious beast. Lin Yi's expression changed greatly when he saw this, and he couldn't care about the sharp pain coming from his internal organs as he gritted his teeth and urged the butterfly's subtle steps with all his strength. Bang! Grass and wood splattered as Lin Yi was once again scratched by the giant claws, and his entire body was sent flying by his true chi once more. Moreover, his internal injuries that were already not light had worsened a step further. If this goes on, I'll undoubtedly die today. Lin Yi knew in his heart that the current situation had already arrived at a moment of life and death. If he still didn't take out an effective countermeasure, then perhaps he would die miserably here in the next moment. Chapter 4087. Just then, Lin Yi waved his hand, and three rare fruits that looked like golden pills appeared in his hand. They were the golden pill fruit of 10,000 crossing. What do you mean? You want to surrender now? Let me tell you, it's too late. The middle-aged man was stunned. When he regained his senses, he sneered in a self-righteous manner. Then, his expression froze. His face was filled with embarrassment and anger from being toyed with. Lin Yi had not taken out the golden pill fruit of 10,000 crossing for him. Instead, he had tossed them into the depths of the dense forest. Lin Yi's expression said that since he could not have them, he would not let him have them either. Damn it! Seeing the golden pill fruit of his dreams fall into the dense forest, the middle-aged man was so angry that his face began to twitch. He wished he could tear Lin Yi into pieces on the spot. However, he dared not chase after Lin Yi anymore. Although he was 200% sure that he could kill Lin Yi, the most important thing now was to retrieve the golden pill fruit of 10,000 crossing. Even if he knew that Lin Yi was taking the opportunity to escape, he could only fall into his trap. After all, there were countless powerful spiritual beasts hiding in the dense forest. If he were to ignore them, the three golden pill fruit of 10,000 crossing might have been eaten by passing spiritual beasts by the time he returned after chasing after Lin Yi. The reason why the 5 high-level spiritual beasts did not eat the golden pill fruit of 10,000 crossing was that it was not fully ripe and could wait for a while. However, now that it had been plucked, it would wither very soon if it was not eaten. These spiritual beasts were not stupid. If they discovered it, they would definitely eat it immediately. If that really happened, it would be useless even if the middle-aged man killed Lin Yi to vent his anger. He would only be drawing water with a wicker basket. I'll let you live a little longer. Once I retrieve the golden pill fruit of 10,000 crossing, you must die today. The middle-aged man cursed bitterly. He turned around impatiently and chased in the direction of the myriad crossing golden dan fruit. He was determined to get it. The middle-aged man entered the dense forest and raised his domineering aura to the extreme, scaring away all the spirit beasts within a few miles. Although doing so in a place like this was akin to asking for trouble, he had no choice but to do this to ensure that the universal golden core fruit would not be eaten by the spirit beasts. This is infuriating. What did this kid throw the myriad golden dan fruit? Watching as Lin Yi took the opportunity to escape, the middle-aged man couldn't help but gnash his teeth in anger. However, he had no choice but to suppress his anger and retrieve the item first. The appearance of the myriad crossing golden dan fruit was indeed dazzling. However, if it fell into this dense forest, even an immortal would not be able to find it easily in a short period of time. After all, this thing was not like humans and spirit beasts, which could sense obvious aura fluctuations. The only choice left for the middle-aged man was to push aside the grass like an ordinary person and search inch by inch with his naked eyes. This went on for half an hour before the middle-aged man finally found traces of the golden pill fruit of 10,000 crossing. It was shot into the trunk of a giant tree, but it did not suffer any damage. It could be seen that Lin Yi had used a skillful technique and purposely protected it with vital energy. The middle-aged man was overjoyed. He immediately went forward and wanted to reach for it. Unexpectedly, an inexplicable sense of danger arose in his heart. Could it be that I've provoked a powerful spirit beast? The middle-aged man frowned. Before he could figure out what was going on, a figure suddenly descended from the sky above him without warning. It was Lin Yi who had just escaped. He would never have thought that Lin Yi, who had clearly escaped in front of him, would actually turn around without any warning. Most importantly, he had taken advantage of the time when he was focused on searching for the golden pill fruit of 10,000 crossing. At this moment, he was almost unaware of Lin Yi's sudden appearance, and he was not mentally prepared at all. In a fight between experts, as long as one was distracted for a moment, it was often enough to be a fatal flaw. Seeing the middle-aged man's reaction, Lin Yi was instantly overjoyed. The strange big circle that he had just used with the butterfly subtle steps just now was not in vain. As long as he caught the middle-aged man by surprise, he could reverse the passive situation that he had been suppressed just now and obtain the opportunity to make a surprise attack. Oomph. You actually dare to come back and attack me with your insignificant strength. So what if I let you make one move first? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Even though he was caught off guard and fell into a passive position, the middle-aged man still did not change his arrogance. The fight just now had already let him know the strength of Lin Yi. At most, it was comparable to the power of the early stage of the Golden Elixir Realm. If Lin Yi wanted to rely on this to deal with a dignified middle stage of the Golden Elixir Realm, it was still far from enough. However, when Lin Yi, who was descending from the sky, combined the pure energy bomb and the pellet firebomb into one, and swooped down on his face with the power to destroy the world, the middle-aged man's face finally changed, and he turned pale instantly. What kind of demon is this kid? This move is not only at the early stage of the Golden Elixir Realm. Even the middle stage of the Golden Elixir Realm is only this. Boom! The huge Hutsai Tianwu Mountain suddenly shook violently, and countless spiritual beasts scattered in panic. Even the vast sea on both sides suddenly set off monstrous waves, like the arrival of a tsunami, which could not subside for a long time. He actually didn't die like this? Enduring the constant pain in his body, Lin Yi looked at the huge, deep pit in front of him, but he still could not find the middle-aged man's figure. His heart could not help but sink. He had even used his most powerful trump card. If even this could not kill the opponent, then Lin Yi really had no other way. He deserved to be called an expert in the middle stage of the Golden Elixir Realm. It was still too much for him to fight to the death with such a strong enemy. But fortunately, from the eye-catching pool of blood on the ground, after being hit by the earth-shattering, super-killing move just now, even if the middle-aged man did not die, he at least lost half of his life. He was already seriously injured and did not dare to fight anymore. Otherwise, he would have killed Lin Yi long ago and would not have escaped without a trace. In this situation, Lin Yi did not dare to stay for too long. He picked up the 10,000 golden elixir fruit and immediately chose a direction to escape. If the middle-aged man turned around with his current state, he would definitely die. He was already seriously injured before, and now he risked both sides to forcefully activate the super-killing move. At this moment, waves of dizziness began to attack Lin Yi's nerves. Even if he did not receive any more attacks, perhaps in the next moment, Lin Yi would lose consciousness and fall on the spot. Forcibly maintaining the last trace of consciousness, Lin Yi did not know how long he ran with serious injuries. Seeing that he had already left the boundary of Hutsai, Tianwu Mountain, he suddenly saw a man-made road in front of him. Only then did he relax, and then he fainted on the ground. Chapter 4088. Lin Yi fainted on the side of the road for half a day, and he didn't move from beginning to end. Fortunately, he had left the boundary of Hutsai, Tianwu Mountain. Otherwise, he would have fallen into the mouth of a powerful spirit beast and become its food. Finally, a group of people came from afar and stopped beside the unconscious Lin Yi. "Why did you stop?" A charming woman's voice came from a luxury car modified by a spirit beast. An accompanying disciple came forward to check Lin Yi and reported, "Miss Situ, we found an injured and unconscious cultivator. Do you think, is it a man or a woman?" The woman in the car, called Miss Situ, asked quickly. "A man," the accompanying disciple replied. "That's great. I can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, but I find it by chance. Quick, bring it to me." Miss Situ immediately ordered someone to open the door, and she gracefully walked out of the car. This woman's face was like a peach blossom, and her face was covered with makeup. Her figure was hot and alluring, and her clothes were light and thin. Even the people who served her all year round couldn't help but secretly swallow their saliva when they saw her. Especially the natural seductive aura that she exuded from her body was enough to take someone's life and make them unable to control themselves. "Search him carefully and find out who he is." Miss Situ looked at Lin Yi with her charming eyes and ordered the accompanying disciple. "Yes." The accompanying disciple immediately obeyed and searched Lin Yi's body carefully, but found nothing except a map with the logo of the North Island Cultivators Guild engraved on the corner. "Miss Situ, if I'm not mistaken, this person should be a cultivator from the North Island. And, judging from his attire, he should be a rogue cultivator, not a disciple of the 3 pavilions of the North Island," the accompanying disciple reported. "A rogue cultivator from the North Island?" Miss Situ's charming eyes suddenly curved, and she immediately smiled and said, "Isn't that great? Bring him up and take him back." "Miss Situ, you mean?" the accompanying disciple asked with some uncertainty. Miss Situ smiled coquettishly, licked her lips seductively, and said, "I've decided on him. There's no need to continue looking." The accompanying disciple hurriedly nodded. "Yes, do we need to treat him? Looking at his injuries, if we don't save him, he won't be able to hold on for long." "And what you said makes sense. Let's treat him then. However, we don't need to use too good a medicinal pill. It's fine as long as you can bring him back to life," young Miss Situ casually instructed before throwing out a 3rd-grade Great Recover pill. The accompanying disciple hurriedly took it and forced it into Lin Yi's mouth. He then asked someone to throw Lin Yi onto a spirit beast carriage at the back and continued to ask, "Miss Situ, shall we go back now?" "Of course, let's go back to Middle Island now." Miss Situ's tone was filled with excitement. "Yes." The accompanying disciple immediately ordered his men to turn around and follow the path they came from. He retraced his steps. Although Lin Yi's body was still unconscious, his primordial spirit had almost recovered under the recuperation of the Jade Pendant space. Relying on his divine sense, he had a clear grasp of everything. Listening to Miss Situ's tone, could it be that there's something unspeakable? It doesn't feel like she's a good person with a pure heart. She seems to have other intentions in getting me into the carriage. There's even a special guard to open the way. Even the way they address me is Mississippi. Why do I feel like I'm back in ancient times? Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder. However, this person fed him a 3rd-grade Great Recover pill. It helped him a lot. Now that Lin Yi's primordial spirit had recovered, he still needed time to heal his physical injuries. This 3rd-grade Great Recover pill could help him recover faster. Half a day later, Lin Yi finally woke up. At this moment, the location of the carriage surprised him. They had almost reached the edge of the mountain forest. It was a completely unfamiliar place. Lin, he frowned secretly. He could still vaguely remember that before he passed out, he was running like crazy and was almost at the edge of Hutsai, Tianwu Mountain. Looking at the current situation, he was afraid that they had already left the range of Hutsai, Tianwu Mountain. Even on the mission map given by the Cultivators Guild of North Island, he couldn't find their current position. As far as Linny knew, once they completely walked out of the range of the mountain forest, there were only two possibilities. One was to return to North Island, and the other was to enter Middle Island. However, looking at the surrounding environment, he had no impression of it at all, and he couldn't compare it with the route on the map. In other words, the direction that this group of people was heading in was very likely not North Island, but Middle Island. As soon as he woke up, Miss Sidhu received a report and personally came to Lin Yi's carriage. She asked in a sweet voice, "My name is Sidhu Qian, and I'm the owner of this group of people. Who are you? How did you get so badly injured, and in such a dangerous place like Hutsai, Tianwu Mountain?" "Thank you, Miss Sidhu, for saving me. My name is Lin Yi, and I'm a rogue cultivator from North Island. I came to Hutsai, Tianwu Mountain for a mission, but I was attacked by spirit beasts." He answered calmly. Although he guessed that the other party might have ulterior motives, he didn't plan to leave for the time being. After all, he had just recovered from his injuries, and he didn't know where he was. The map was completely useless, and if he left halfway, even with Skybolt Pig, it would be very difficult for him to find his way back. After all, Skybolt Pig's talent was to hunt for treasures, not to find a way. "Oh, I see." Sidhu Qian didn't suspect anything. After nodding, she suddenly leaned forward and posed in a seductive posture. "I heard that there are no female cultivators in the North Island. Do you think I'm pretty?" She said that's right. He was slightly stunned, and he didn't understand what she meant. If he were to measure her with the eyes of an ordinary person, Miss Sidhu would have a good figure and a pretty face. She could be considered a rare beauty in the world. However, Sidhu Qian had a coquettish air about her, which made dislike her. He even thought of another woman who had a similar temperament to her, Morongjun. Moreover, when it came to looks, Sidhu Qian could not even be compared to the girlfriends he had in the secular world. Even his little concubine, Rock Candy Snow Pear, was more than enough to beat Sidhu Qian. Chapter 4089. Therefore, in the end, he pinched his nose and complimented her. "Miss Sidhu is very beautiful. You are as beautiful as a fairy." "Is that so? You really are an honest man." Hearing this, Sidhu Qian smiled happily. She then said, "This young lady also thinks that you are very heroic. It is rare to see someone who dares to do a mission in the Hutsai Tian Wu Mountain alone. It will be a pity to miss such a rare talent like you. How about you come to our Sidhu clan and work for us?" He was stunned. He had been wondering what this Miss Sidhu wanted to do. He did not expect her to make such a sudden request. Sidhu Qian smiled as she lifted Lin Yi's chin and licked her lips. "If you agree, I'll give you one of my maids as a reward. She's not as pretty as I am, but she's still a rare beauty. Just nod your head, and she'll be yours." Lin Yi's eyes lit up as he said, "I'll give you one of my maids as a reward. She's not as pretty as me, but she's still a rare beauty." Linny could not help but frown. No matter how he thought about it, these words were full of conspiracy. This flirtatious woman first used words and body language to seduce him. Then, she said that she wanted to betroth him to a beautiful maidservant. If it were any other cultivator who was slightly more impulsive, they would not be able to resist such temptation. However, he was already on guard against this woman. He remained calm from the beginning. These random seductions had no effect on him. In fact, he did not even look at Sidhu Qian. Just take Shangwan Lan'er and Ning Shuafei, who had been together recently, for example. Both of them were prettier than Sidhu Qian. Even the disfigured Huang Xiaodao gave He a better impression than Sidhu Qian. However, he had to go with her for the time being. He could not fall out with Sidhu Qian. He could only pretend to be happy and cooperated. Really? That's great. To be honest, Miss Sidhu, I've always been lonely and depressed in the North Island. Female cultivators are rare, and only those cultivators with powerful sex and backgrounds have the chance to meet them. It's an extravagant dream for me to even meet one, and ordinary women can't be my partner. Miss Sidhu, you not only saved my life, but also helped me in my hour of need. I can't repay your kindness." Seeing that Lin Yi had taken the bait, Sidhu Qian's lips curled into a smile, and she used her sleeves to brush Lin Yi's cheeks. "Very well. Rest well then. I'll make arrangements for you when the time comes. As long as you listen to me and do what I say, I'll make sure you get the girl." Yes, I will listen to Miss Sidhu." Lin Yi pretended to be lecherous. His eyes even wandered up and down Sidhu Qian's body and nodded repeatedly. Sidhu Qian did not show any displeasure. Instead, she seemed to enjoy it very much. She even deliberately twisted her waist and rubbed against Lin Yi's body. Then she got out of the car with a smile. Looking at Sidhu Qian's back as she left, Lin Yi's face suddenly turned cold. This woman was really not easy to deal with. Just now, he deliberately took the opportunity to observe her strength. She turned out to be an expert at the peak of foundation establishment. She was really something. For the next 2 days, Lin Yi stayed in the car. Besides completely healing his injuries, he also took the opportunity to slightly consolidate his strength. Recently, his strength had also improved by leaps and bounds. He was a little complacent, but after the battle with the expert at the middle stage of the Gold Core realm, his impetuous mood had long disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by an infinite desire to become stronger. Only strength could make a foothold in this heaven stage island. In these 2 days, the convoy had completely left the range of the mountains and forests and entered a bustling area. To Lin Yi's great surprise, whether it was the customs or the architecture, it was almost the same as the ancient capital city. Unlike the solemn cultivation sects in the North Island, this was a bustling big city. All along the way, various inns, shops, restaurants, brothels, and casinos appeared ceaselessly on both sides of the road. Every single place in the mortal world that one could think of could be found here. Besides this, it was the deep courtyards of some great clans that were scattered amidst the bustling downtown, and it had a deep and serene aura of tranquility amidst the hustle and bustle, causing others to feel envious. Is this the central island that everyone yearns for? Lin Yi could not help but be amazed. In his imagination, the central island, with a legendary top sex gathered, should be similar to the 3 pavilions in the North Island, with famous mountains and Taoist rites everywhere. However, he did not expect it to be such an unexpectedly prosperous scene. It made him feel as if he had returned to the secular world. It was noisy and lively, but it always gave people a rare sense of peace. Of course, this was the ancient secular world. While he was amazed, the convoy had driven into a deep mansion. From the dazzling layers of courtyards, it should be a rare, rich family. After getting off the car, Lin Yi was immediately arranged to a separate guest room, but no one came to greet him. It was just that the guards outside had received orders from Sidhu Qian to not allow Lin Yi to leave without permission. In desperation, Lin Yi could only stay in the room and wait. With his current strength comparable to that of an expert at the early stage of the Gold Core realm, although it was not difficult to get rid of these guards, it was hard to say after he went out. After all, this was the central island where all kinds of people gathered. With Lin Yi's current strength, he might not be able to deal with some sudden changes. Instead, it was better to stay here for the time being and observe the changes. In the evening, Sidhu Qian finally arrived. This time, she had purposely changed into a thinner and more revealing low-cut gauze dress. Her breasts were surging and her flesh was showing. Coupled with her coquettish and seductive aura, she was constantly provoking the instincts of men. "Young Masterling, I have really neglected you today. After a few days of traveling, my body is sticky, so I want to take a bath. I hope you don't mind." Sidhu Qian smiled charmingly and stuck to Lin Yi's side. Her alluring body then rubbed against him. "Not at all. Miss Sidhu, you are very considerate. I am very satisfied." Lin Yi laughed secretly in his heart. She wanted to seduce him with this kind of thing. She was simply asking to be humiliated. However, on the surface, Lin Yi still deliberately cooperated. His eyes were shining and his breathing was rapid. He looked like a typical pervert. Chapter 4090. Miss Situ, you are too kind. I am not worthy of your kindness. Lin Yi quickly thanked her. I'm giving you this ginseng soup. It is not only to nourish your body, there's also a deeper meaning behind it. Situ Qian pretended to feed Lin Yi the soup herself. At the same time, she chuckled and said, I have personally decided that tonight will be the wedding night between you and my servant. Every minute is worth 1,000 gold. How can you not take this opportunity to nourish yourself? What do you think? Really? That is great. Thank you so much, Miss Situ. Lin Yi pretended to be impatient. He took the ginseng soup with both hands and took a small sip. Back in Immortal World, Lin Yi was already an expert in medicine. He could tell what was in the ginseng soup with just one taste. With just a small sip, he could already analyze the ingredients in the soup. There was nothing wrong with this ginseng soup. However, there was a small amount of seasoning added in. It was nothing else but a tiger's wolf's potion for sexual intercourse. It was similar to the medicine used in the mortal world to nourish yang. Could it be that Situ Qian really wants me to consummate my marriage with her servant? Lin Yi was even more confused. Before this, he had always thought that Situ Qian was just teasing him with a little sweetness. She wanted him to do something shady. But now, she was actually giving him this kind of medicine. This was too strange. How is it? Is the ginseng soup good? Situ Qian stared at Lin Yi with a burning gaze. It seemed that if he did not drink it all in front of her, she would not let Lin Yi go easily. Good. Delicious. Lin Yi decided to beat her at her own game. He tilted his head back and drank the whole bowl of ginseng soup. After all, there was only so much seasoning. After drinking it, he could directly refine it in his body. It would not have any effect at all. However, after drinking it, Lin Yi deliberately pretended to be burning with lust. His body was burning hot and his eyes were bloodshot. Panting heavily, he reached out to touch Situ Qian's body. Situ Qian did not dodge and allowed Lin Yi to take advantage of her. Her lips curled up as she said, All right, young hero Ling, I'll get someone to send you to the bridal chamber now. After saying that, Situ Qian snapped her fingers and summoned a guard from outside to take Lin Yi away. However, in the next moment, Situ Qian, who had been flirtatious just a moment ago, suddenly had a cold and vicious expression on her face. He said to a maid who pushed open the door and entered, Little Chihuahua, how is it? Have you arranged everything? Everything has been arranged. Miss, please take a look. Little Chihuahua handed over an item to her in a flattering manner. It was an MP4 that looked like a tablet computer. Situ Qian took it and turned it on. A surveillance image of a room appeared on the screen. There was a beautiful woman sitting in the room. She was dressed in a white dress and looked like a fairy who had fallen into the mortal world. She was untainted by the mortal world, causing people to admire her, but they could not bear to profane her. TSK, TSK. The things that this Central Chamber of Commerce sells are really advanced. It is said that this is the most advanced technology in the mortal world. Only the Central Chamber of Commerce can do it. Just a small surveillance device like this costs 10,000 spiritual jades. It's really expensive. Situ Qian looked at the woman on the screen and sneered. Yes, miss, but this thing is really useful when the time comes. As long as you show this video to Senior Brother Wei and let him know that the woman that he has his eyes on is actually a slut, he will definitely change his mind and know how good you are. Little Chihuahua chuckled as she flattered Little Chihuahua. That's right. A mere maid who is not even worth a fart dares to compete with me? Let's see if I don't kill you this time. Ha ha. Situ Qian laughed proudly and said, Originally, I told Senior Brother Wei that this maid Xiao Shui has a mistress outside, and she is a slut. Senior Brother Wei didn't believe me, but I didn't expect that he would catch a fool so quickly. Anyway, there is no sound in the video. Let this fool go and fuck that bitch. When the time comes, they will be unable to explain themselves. Hee hee, little miss is still the smart one. The facts are right in front of us. Senior Brother Wei has no choice but to believe it. In any case, that slut's virginity has already been taken by that idiot. So Senior Brother Wei will definitely give up. Little Chihuahua also laughed complacently. Of course, if it wasn't for fear of Senior Brother Wei's suspicion, I would have already killed that bitch. Why would I go through so much trouble and waste 10,000 spiritual jades to buy this surveillance device? Situ Qian said hatefully. 10,000 spiritual jades was not a small amount for anyone. Even for a young miss like her, it could be considered as a big loss. There is nothing we can do about it. Senior Brother Wei is such a smart person. If there is no solid evidence, he will definitely not believe it, and that will be troublesome. However, the current situation is already foolproof. Young lady's decision is very safe. With young lady's outstanding intelligence, Senior Brother Wei will definitely worship under your skirt, and no one will be able to snatch him away. Little Chiu Hua said with a flattering smile. You little girl, you always like to speak such truth. Situ Qian was overjoyed when she heard this, and then suddenly said, By the way, has the thing that can restore a virgin's body arrived from the Central Chamber of Commerce? Not yet, but I've already urged them to send it over as soon as possible. Little Chihuahua replied, This is a very important matter. Little Chihuahua, you have to keep a close eye on me. Otherwise, if Senior Brother Wei finds out that I'm not a virgin, then the consequences would be unimaginable. Even Situ Qian herself felt guilty. Seeing this, little Chihuahua comforted her and said, Miss, in fact, you don't have to worry so much. Those male toys who accompanied us for fun have been quietly dealt with. No one will know about this matter. If it is really not possible, you can say that it was torn during cultivation, and it should be no problem. Don't people often say this kind of thing? Hearing this, Situ Qian shook her head decisively and said, No, this is an important matter of life, and there is no room for carelessness. It is better to be safe. Otherwise, if I say that I have torn it, will you also tear it with me? Little girl, have you forgotten that when the time comes, you will also have to serve Senior Brother Wei with me? Yes, then I will go and urge them now. Miss, you can rest assured, hee hee. When little Chihuahua thought that she would also throw herself into the arms of Senior Brother Wei, she was instantly overjoyed. This was her long-cherished wish, and she immediately trotted out of the door. Chapter 4091. This is the place you can go in by yourself. Under the guidance of the guard, Lin Yi walked past a few courtyards before stopping in front of a closed bedroom. Lin Yi's footsteps paused for a moment as he pondered what Situ Qian was up to. No matter how he thought about it, what happened today was too strange. Either that, Situ Qian had something she wanted him to do, so she gave her maidservant to him as a reward in advance. Or there was something strange about the bedroom in front of him, or the so-called handmaiden was a monster and he was being used as a sacrifice. Otherwise, there was no need for her to give him medicine. While he was secretly on guard, Lin Yi did not show any hesitation on the surface. Under the supervision of the guard, he pushed open the door and walked in. However, as soon as he entered the door, the terrifying and dangerous scene that he had expected was completely different. Not only was there no danger in the closed bedroom, but there was a beautiful woman in white sitting in the middle. Lin Yi was stunned at first glance. He actually knew this woman in white. Sydney. Lin Yi was stunned for a moment before he shouted in disbelief. Back in the secular world, strictly speaking, Lin Yi and Sydney did not have many interactions, and their relationship did not develop clearly. However, on the way to Heavenly Island, the two of them accidentally confirmed their relationship. Even though their relationship was not as close as it was with other girlfriends, after half a year, Lin Yi could not help but feel as if a lifetime had passed since they met again. It was just like when he met Tian Chan on the extreme North Island. At this moment, his heart was rippling with the rare warmth of reunion. However, at this moment, Sydney did not notice Lin Yi's call. She only raised her head and stared blankly at the ceiling. He was lost in thought. She had originally come to the heaven stage island full of longing, thinking that it would be a paradise for cultivators. But she hadn't expected that the law of the jungle was even more cruel and merciless than the secular world. What was even worse was that she, a heaven stage great perfection expert who could walk unhindered in the secular world, had become the weakest existence here. After he was teleported to the middle island, he looked around. Almost all of them were much more powerful than her. Tian-chan, Patriarch Xian-shun, and the others, who she was familiar with, were taken away by others one after another. In the end, she was brought to a place called the Snow Sword School. She thought she would become a disciple there and start over from the bottom. She had already made mental preparations for this, but the reality was even crueler. She was not even as good as the ordinary disciple at the bottom. Instead, she was taken in as a maid by the granddaughter of an elder of the Snow Sword faction. The Valley Master of the Snow Valley, who used to be such a noble existence in the secular world, had now become a servant girl who served others. Every day, he was forced to do the lowliest and most vulgar work. Life was full of impermanence. It was truly laughable. However, when faced with such a cruel reality, Sydney could not resist at all. She did not have the strength to resist. This granddaughter of an elder was already a high and mighty expert at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment. She was just a mediocre person at the peak of Heaven stage. If she wanted to break free from this person's shadow, it was no different from a fool's dream. For the past 6 months, Sydney had been doing the menial work of a servant. Every day, her only hope was that she could serve this Miss Sidhu well and get her to teach her some techniques to break through to the Foundation establishment stage. Unfortunately, this Miss Sidhu did not take her seriously from beginning to end. Not only did she not treat her well because of this, but she also disliked her in every way because of her appearance and temperament. She repeatedly found all kinds of excuses to punish her. There were several times when she was beaten black and blue and could not get out of bed. However, she still had to grit her teeth and continue to work. She could not bear to look back on the bitterness. Struggling like this, Sydney endured for a whole 6 months. She thought that her miserable fate would continue like this. She did not expect that a secret tryst between Sidhu Qian and her lover would become a turning point in her life. It was just that this turning point was not a good one. Senior Brother Wei, who was mentioned by Sidhu Qian, accidentally discovered her existence. He was immediately shocked and fell in love with her at first sight. Then, he found out that Sydney's constitution was that of an innate cold body, which was very suitable to cultivate the core mental cultivation method of the Snow Sword faction. Chapter 4092. At that moment, Sydney could no longer control her emotions. She threw herself into Lin Yi's arms and started to cry. For the past 6 months, she had been trying to find out about Lin Yi. However, no matter what method she used, there was no news at all. No one knew who Lin Yi was. Unexpectedly, just as she was about to lose all hope, the lover that she had been yearning for day and night had appeared. Finally, she could feel the warmth of his embrace again. Fate had played a cruel joke on her. However, at least it had not completely abandoned her. Sydney's reaction caught Lin Yi off guard. He did not know what she had been through in the past 6 months. However, as a man, what he needed to do was to hug her quietly and let her vent all of her grievances. As he gently stroked Sydney's skinny back, Lin Yi was slightly surprised. In his memory, Sydney's figure was quite voluptuous. In the end, after not seeing her for a few months, she had become so skinny. The bitterness in this made his heart ache. Buried in Lin Yi's arms, Sydney cried for a long time. Finally, she gradually recovered. She looked up at Lin Yi with her tear-stained face. It was an enchanting sight. "All right, Sydney, tell me, what happened to you in the past 6 months? How did you lose so much weight?" Lin Yi could not help but ask. Sydney nodded obediently. She immediately began to tell Lin Yi everything. She was full of grievances, and she needed someone to listen to her. At the same time, Sidu Qian, who was monitoring the room through her MP4, was overjoyed when she saw the two of them hugging each other tightly. Although she could only see the image and could not hear what the two of them were talking about, she felt that it was enough. Everything went according to her plan. After drugging Ling Chun, he could just let him go in and push Sydney down. In any case, she could say that he was Sydney's lover. Regardless of whether Senior Marshal Brother Wei believed her or not, the rice had already been cooked. He could only kill this adulterous couple to vent his anger. However, none of this had anything to do with Sidu Qian. She could just say that her lover had snuck in on his own and that she had only found out about it after watching the surveillance footage. However, the scene before her eyes had completely exceeded her expectations. The two of them actually hugged each other and whispered sweet nothings to each other as soon as they entered the door. There was no trace of coercion at all. Now, there was even foreplay. It was simply too perfect and realistic. Just as I expected, this bitch looks like she's as pure as ice and as clean as jade, but she's actually a slut. She even wants this kind of unbearably vulgar wild man. She's really coquettish to a certain level. You actually dare to snatch Senior Brother away from me. Bitch wants to have such a good life. Situ Qian cursed with a smug look on her face. From her angle, she could not see that Sydney was crying. She could only see the two of them hugging each other tightly. Therefore, it did not matter whether the two of them did it or not. Just the scene alone was enough to prove that Sydney had a wild man outside. Senior Marshal Brother Wei would definitely not want this kind of dirty bitch. Her plan had succeeded. Furthermore, it was unexpectedly smooth. Sidu Qian could not wait any longer and immediately asked someone to call Xiao Qiuhua back. Soon, the next step could be started. In the closed bedroom, Lin Yi quietly listened to Sydney's tragic experience. Even he felt wronged for Sydney. He gritted his teeth and said, "This Sydney is really not a good person. However, since I'm here now, you don't have to be afraid anymore. I'll definitely avenge you 100 times, 1,000 times." Okay, Sydney nodded happily. However, she then said worriedly, she is now a foundation-building full-cycle expert. She is not someone we can fight against. Let's wait and see. Being able to see Lin Yi again today made her very happy. She did not want Lin Yi to lose his life in a moment of impulse. That would turn a comedy into a tragedy. We don't have to wait for too long. However, we do need to find a suitable opportunity. Lin Yi shook his head. He had the ability to kill Sidu Qian. The biggest problem was that he was unfamiliar with the place. What should he do after killing her? He could only figure out the situation first. All right, Sydney, you are still at Heaven Stage full cycle. Have you not broken through to foundation building? Lin Yi asked. No. In the past half a year, I have not even seen a method to break through to foundation building. I also do not have any cultivation resources, let alone trying to break through to foundation building, Sydney said helplessly. Lin Yi could not help but feel distressed. Even people like Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai, who followed him, were already in the early stage of foundation building. Sydney was the leader of the Snow Valley. In terms of talent and foundation, she was much stronger than these people. However, she had not broken through to foundation building. Fate was unpredictable. Fortunately for the current Lin Yi, getting some foundation building pills to help Sydney break through to foundation building was a very simple task. As long as Sydney was in the right state, she could try it at any time. Sydney, I can. Lin Yi was about to tell her about it, but when he looked down, he found that Sydney had already fallen asleep in his arms. She was sleeping very soundly. Ever since she came to Heaven Stage Island, she had never slept so peacefully. Sleep well, have a sweet dream. I'll take you away from here when you wake up tomorrow. Lin Yi patted Shui Li's back gently and pulled her into his arms, snuggling against each other. On the other side, although Sidu Qian did not see the two's next move, she could not hold back anymore. After little Qiuhua came back, she immediately asked her to bring the video to Senior Brother Wei so that he could enjoy the show. After an hour, Senior Brother Wei rushed over angrily. When he saw Sidu Qian, his first sentence was full of killing intent. Where is that shameless couple? I'm going to kill them. Senior Brother Wei, don't be angry. It is not worth it to hurt your body because of this bitch. I will take you to her. Situ Qian was very proud of herself. While leading the way, she said, I told you that this bitch has a lover outside. Senior Brother Wei, you didn't believe me at first. Fortunately, we caught you in the act. Otherwise, you would have been tricked by this bitch to become dual cultivation partners. Senior Brother Wei, your reputation will be ruined. You see, I am still the best. Hearing this, Senior Brother Wei's face darkened. He did not say anything, but the killing intent emitted from his body became even stronger. Chapter 4093. In his eyes, Xueli was like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. Otherwise, he would not have fallen in love with her at first sight. He did not expect her to be with such a crude and boorish man. This was simply unbearable. If he had not seen the surveillance video, he would not have believed it. But now, the only thought in his mind was to kill this adulterous couple to vent his anger. Bang! The door was kicked into pieces. Senior Brother Wei stepped into the bedroom. Looking at the two who were still hugging each other, he was so angry that his eyes were on fire. He pointed at Sydney and cursed. You bitch, which part of me, Wei Shinjin, is inferior to this boorish man? He looks so boorish. I did not expect a bitch like you to like this. Good, very good. I will kill you both today. Yes, an adulterous couple should be killed. They should be cut into pieces. Situ Qian fanned the flames. At this moment, Xueli, who was sound asleep in Lin Yi's arms, was awakened. She was startled when she saw Wei Shinjin, who looked like he was going to eat someone alive, and shrunk into Lin Yi's arms. As for Lin Yi, he had already noticed Wei Shinjin before he kicked the door. But even if he had noticed it in advance, he could not do anything about it. The only problem he had to think about was how to take Sydney away from here. This guy should not be underestimated. He was an expert in the early stage of the Gold Core realm. Lin was on his guard, but his face was cold. You're sick, aren't you? Sydney and I are in love with each other. We have known each other for a long time. What does it have to do with you that we are together? What did you say? You have been together for a long time? Wei Shinjin was so angry that his eyes widened. He felt that he was being cheated on. All this while, he had been busy preparing for the wedding in order to marry Xueli. He had even let the news out. What was done could not be undone. Little did he expect that Xueli had already had such a wild lover. He was going to be so embarrassed this time. Seeing this, Situ Qian chimed in, Xueli is my maid. She belongs to me, so her marriage is naturally decided by me. You vulgar wild man, you actually dare to clamor in front of Senior Brother Wei here? Could it be that you think that our Snow Sword School doesn't have anyone left, that we could be bullied by an ant like you? Lin looked at Situ Qian and smiled coldly at Wei Shinjin. This junior sister of yours is the real bitch. You don't even know how many men have ridden on you before you interfered with me and Xueli's business. You better take care of your own family matters first. Don't come out and embarrass yourself and make people laugh their heads off. Hearing this, Wei Shinjin did not react. However, Situ Qian jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She pointed at Lin Yi and said, Senior Brother Wei, this man dares to insult me. Help me kill him. This adulterous couple, we can't let them walk out of here alive today. Otherwise, Senior Brother Wei, you won't be able to face anyone. Situ Qian was a woman who could be ridden by 1,000 men. Lin was right. It was no wonder that she was panicking. It did not matter if Lin Yi had guessed it or not. Just based on this sentence alone, Lin Yi had to die today. No matter what, she was going to kill him to silence him, to prevent future trouble. At this time, there was no need for Situ Qian to instigate. Wei Shinjin had already attacked Lin Yi and Sydney. Just as Situ Qian had said, they could not let this adulterous couple go today. This was not only to vent their anger, but also to cover up their shame. Only by killing them would they be able to put an end to this scandal. As for the marriage that had been rumored before, if things did not work out, they could only ask Situ Qian to take the blame. Anyway, this woman was more than happy to do so. Lin Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. Wei Shinjin was a master in the early phase of the Golden Elixir stage. Any one of his moves was no small matter. If it was just Lin Yi, he wouldn't have to worry. With his current strength, he could even fight with a master in the middle phase of the Golden Elixir stage. Moreover, the opponent was only at the early phase of the Golden Elixir stage. However, the key point was that he had Sydney in his arms. She had the strength of a heaven stage exceptional realm. Even a casual brush from a foundation building expert would be seriously injured or even killed, let alone a beginner of the Golden Elixir realm. If they really fought here, Lin Yi could not guarantee the safety of Sydney. If something really happened, even if he could kill them to vent his anger, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Moreover, this was the territory of the Snow Sword faction. If he really killed people here, he would inevitably be wanted by the Snow Sword faction. In the future, it would be difficult for him to move in the Middle Island, and he might not even have a place to hide. Retreat first. Lin Yi made up his mind instantly. Facing the fierce attack of Wei Shinjin, he did not have the slightest intention of fighting him head-on. His body flashed, and he was about to rush to Sidu Qian. This wild man is quite fast, but he still has to die. Seeing this, Wei Shinjin paused for a moment and then changed his attack. His body flashed, and he reached out his hand to block in front of Sidu Qian. Although Sidu Qian was also a foundation building expert in the peak, and it would not be so easy to sneak attack her, this woman must be lacking in actual combat. If she was not careful, it was very likely that she would be defeated by someone stronger than her. After all, she was the granddaughter of an elder. If she was taken hostage by the opponent, Wei Shinjin would not be able to take action. However, the next moment, Wei Shinjin's face suddenly turned extremely ugly. Lin Yi's action of rushing to Sidu Qian was a premeditated fake move. The purpose was to trick Wei Shinjin. Taking advantage of this subtle gap, Lin Yi instantly changed his direction and performed the butterfly subtle steps to the extreme. He carried Sydney on his back and rushed out of the room. He just happened to pass by Wei Shinjin, who was busy protecting Sidu Qian. I'm so angry. Watching Lin Yi and Sidu Qian rush out of the room, the feeling of being defeated in front of him made Wei Shinjin angry. Relying on the powerful strength of the early stage of the Gold Core realm, he more or less underestimated his opponent. He did not even think that Lin Yi could burst out with such amazing speed in an instant. Even he did not have time to react. Despicable scum, do you think you can escape from my palm like this? I want to see where you can run to. Wei Shinjin immediately followed. He said that he would kill the two of them, so they would definitely die. No matter where they escaped to, they would not be able to live. Chapter 4094. Lin Yi, why don't you put me down? Sydney leaned on Lin Yi's back. She was nervous and embarrassed. No need. He won't let this go. It'll be faster this way, Lin Yi said without turning his head. He performed the butterfly subtle steps with all his strength. Even with a person on his back, he was still much faster than Sydney, who was at the peak of Heaven stage. Although the butterfly subtle steps were very exquisite, Wei Shinjin's figure had already caught up with them in just a moment. Carrying a person on his back had a huge impact on his speed. Moreover, his opponent was an expert at the early stage of the Gold Core realm, and one who was good at lightness skill. Go to hell. Wei Shinjin grinned hideously. His already extremely fast speed suddenly increased. In an instant, he dashed to the back of Lin Yi and Chun Xiaobei. He struck towards them with his palm. He was going to kill them both at once. However, Lin Yi was already prepared for this. He condensed true qi at his fingertips. Without turning his head, he only used divine sense to lock onto his opponent's thigh. Wei Shinjin was caught off guard and hit the target. The Finger of Power was the martial arts technique that Su Zhaohu used to kill Chen Mujuan. It was powerful, but not profound. Lin Yi easily mastered and improved it into the Finger of Power of Fire after seeing it once. At this time, it could be put to good use. In the future, he could blame it on Su Zhaohu. Anyway, this person was already dead, and the dead could not testify. By the time these people realized that something was wrong and suspected him, he would have already returned to the North Island. Fuck! A sharp pain came from his thigh. Wei Shenjin's face suddenly turned black. His feet trembled, and then he bumped into a pile of garbage. He watched Lin and Chan Xiaobei run away, but he couldn't get up to catch up. He could only clench his teeth and say, "This insidious bastard. If I had known earlier, I would have killed him with my sword." As a core disciple of the Snow Sword School, Wei Shenjin's real strength was using the sword. However, when he moved his sword, there would be a sign of snow. This was the downtown area of the Heaven Stage Island. Fighting here was clearly prohibited. On top of that, due to his carelessness, he was prepared to deal with Lin, Yi, and Zhang Xian with his palm. He did not expect that he would be injured instead. "Senior Brother Wei, why are you injured?" Sidu Qian, who had caught up from behind, was stunned when she saw Wei Shenjin lying in a pile of garbage. Wei Shenjin was a core disciple that was viewed as a pillar by the higher-ups of the Snow Sword faction. He was a golden core expert. In Sidu Qian's eyes, it would be a piece of cake for him to hunt down Ling, Yi, and Sydney. Ling, he had just recovered from his heavy injuries. Moreover, he was carrying a burden like Sydney on his back. Their target was so obvious. It would be a miracle if they could escape from Wei Shenjin. Who would have thought that they would actually fail miserably in such an easy task? "It's nothing. I was just careless and was ambushed by him." Wei Shenjin's face suddenly became a little embarrassed, and he replied gloomily. Situ Qian helped him up for the ground doubtfully and asked, "What should we do now? We can't just let that bitch couple escape, right?" Situ Qian could not help but suspect that Wei Shenjin still had fantasies about that bitch. That was why she had shown mercy just now. Otherwise, the other party would not have been able to escape so easily. But if that was the case, she was in an awkward situation. Wei Shenjin still had feelings for Sydney. If that was the case, how would she be able to become his Dao companion? Furthermore, just now, when Lin Yi scolded her for being ridden by 1,000 men, she was really shocked. Therefore, no matter what, she had to find a way to silence this bitch couple. Only then would she be able to be at ease. Otherwise, if the two of them were to live for another day, it would be a fatal danger. How can we let them go? These bitches must die. Let's go back and report to the sect now. Let's have the entire city arrest them. Let's see where they can run to. Wei Shenjin gritted his teeth and said. When Situ Qian heard this, she was overjoyed. This was exactly what she wanted. She then asked, Yes, we must make it impossible for them to escape. But what excuse should we use to report to the sect? If they were to directly tell the truth, Wei Shenjin would lose a lot of face. He thought for a while and said, Let's say that Sydney eloped with that wild man, and before she escaped, she ambushed and injured me. Senior brother is wise. That way, she will be considered to have betrayed the sect. We don't even need to do anything ourselves. The upper echelons will definitely tear this bitch couple into pieces. Situ Qian praised happily. After the two of them discussed, they immediately acted according to the plan. As expected, the upper echelons of the Snow Sword faction were furious when they found out about the situation. Betraying the sect was the most serious crime in any force. They immediately mobilized the entire sect's power and issued a warrant to the entire city for Lin, Yi, and Sydney. After all, the Snow Sword faction was able to establish a foothold in Middle Island. Once the Snow Sword faction took action, it was like a thunderbolt. In just a short half an hour, the warrant had already spread all over the city. On the warrant was a rough sketch of the two people's appearance and temperament. The man was named as a rough martial artist, and the woman was the Snow Sword faction's handmaiden, Sydney. When they saw that there was a warrant posted in front of them, and it just so happened that the warrant was for the two of them, Lin, Yi, and Sydney were instantly shocked. They didn't expect the other party to react so quickly. Fortunately, they had been moving in an empty alley and there were no passers-by. Otherwise, their whereabouts would have been exposed long ago. Lin Yi hurriedly stopped with Sydney and retreated to an empty alley. He took off the 1,000 silk mask and revealed his real face. Looking at Lin Yi's familiar face, Sydney's eyes couldn't help but show some affection and tenderness. Although she already knew that the other party was Lin Yi, there was still a big difference between the face of an unfamiliar rough martial artist and the original appearance of Lin Yi. However, there was no time for her to sigh. As expected, the entire city was filled with wanted posters. This made her a little scared and panicky. She looked up at Lin Yi and said guiltily, "Lin Yi, I'm sorry. It's all my fault." "What nonsense are you talking about? You're my little wife. Doesn't that count?" Lin Yi deliberately said with a straight face. You still remember this." Sydney lowered her head blissfully and shyly. On her white cheeks, there was a little more attractive blush. It was like a flower emitting a mature luster. It made people unconsciously fall in love with her. Even Lin Yi's eyes were glued to it. He couldn't help but look at it. "That's right. How did your strength become so strong? You can even injure Wei Xinjin of the Gold Course stage. Are you also an expert of the Gold Course stage?" Sydney suddenly asked. Chapter 4095. Such an expert would definitely be an official disciple in any top-notch sect. Lin Yi shook his head and explained, "That's not it. I'm still at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment, but I've always been able to defeat enemies of a higher level. It's not like you don't know about the things in the secular world. Here, it's just the same." Hearing this, Sydney was immediately shocked. Lin Yi's words were said casually, but the meaning behind it was not as simple as that. The secular world and the heavenly island were two completely different levels. A top existence in the secular world, like her, was just the lowest level of an ant on the heavenly island. The so-called genius also depended on the quality of the gold. A peerless genius in the secular world was nothing on the heavenly island. Such examples could be found everywhere. Perhaps only a freak like Lin Yi, who could always transcend all the way to the end, could be called a real genius. After being shocked for a long time, Sydney finally came back to her senses. While she was sincerely happy for Lin Yi, she still couldn't help but worry. She gently bit her lips and said, "How about, Lin Yi, you go alone first. You're strong and your appearance is different from the wanted poster. No one will come to trouble you. But it's different if you bring me along. It'll be difficult for us to move forward, and it'll be impossible to escape. So in the future, don't say things like letting me go alone first. It's useless even if you say it. Anyway, I won't listen." Listening to these words, Sydney's heart warmed, and a long-lost happiness surged in her heart. Once again, she threw herself into Lin Yi's arms and couldn't help but cry tears of joy. Lin Yi never said words of love, nor did he know how to say such words of love. He didn't even know how to please a woman. However, a reliable and responsible man was enough to kill all the romance and vows of eternal love. Holding Sydney in his arms, Lin Yi said, "Let's go. Let's find a place to stay first." In this situation, it was already a pipe dream to take Sydney to escape from the Central Island. The only way was to find a safe and reliable place to stay, wait for the storm to pass, and then find a way to leave here. Letting Sydney lie on his back and cover her face, Lin Yi took the lead and walked out of the alley. On the street, all kinds of pedestrians came and went in an endless stream. Almost every 100 feet, there was a special notice board. The notice board was full of various sects, and the wanted posters for Lin Yi and Sydney were naturally included. Fortunately, Lin Yi was now in his original appearance, and Sydney didn't show her face. Thus, for the time being, no one would suspect the two of them. After passing through 2 streets, Lin Yi finally found the place. At first glance, it looked ordinary in front of him. However, it was a 3-story attic with a unique style on this bustling street. It was the destination of his trip, 5 Elements Commerce. When he was in the North Island, Hong Zhong had specially told him that if he was accidentally stranded in the Central Island, he could ask Deputy Shopkeeper Kai of 5 Elements Commerce, which was under the jurisdiction of the Central Island Alchemy Hall, for help. This sentence was just in case, but he didn't expect that it would come in handy under a free combination of factors. It had even become the only life-saving straw that Lin he could grasp at the moment. Lin had never seen this deputy shopkeeper Kai before, and he didn't know what kind of person he was. He didn't even know if he would be willing to help him or if he could help him. But other than that, he had no other choice. After all, in this central island, he was unfamiliar with the people and the place. Although Tian Chan was in the Middle Island Alchemy Hall, her status and strength were far from enough to protect the two of them. Before he solved the problem on his body, he didn't want her to get involved in anything. As for his cheap master Zhang Liju, who he had never met before, if he could get his recognition, then he could do whatever he wanted. It was a pity that this elixir god was very secretive. Even the people from the Middle Island Alchemy Hall rarely saw him, let alone who had just arrived. Without a choice, he could only place his hope on this deputy shopkeeper Kai. Birds of a feather flocked together, and with Hong Zhong's kind character, a good friend that he respected so much, he shouldn't be someone who would forsake his friends for the sake of profit. Carrying Sydney on his back, he didn't hesitate and walked into the Five Elements Commerce. When the worker came to greet him, he said, "Please, I'm looking for Deputy Shopkeeper Kai." The worker looked him up and down and saw that he was carrying a woman on his back. He didn't have any suspicions and nodded. "Oh, you're here to see Deputy Shopkeeper Kai, right? I'll take you there." This Deputy Shopkeeper Kai was Zhang Liju's disciple in name. His medical skills were extremely good, and so there was an endless stream of people coming to see him. It was as if this place had become half a medical center, and the worker was used to it. Although some people complained in private, they didn't dare to show it. Even the real shopkeeper, who was backed by Zheng Dongjue, the deputy hall master of Middle Island Elixir Hall, didn't dare to do anything to this deputy shopkeeper Kai. Behind him was Zhang Liju, a super god. Even Zheng Dongjue had to bow to him. Messing with him in this Five Elements Commerce was equivalent to looking for death. He followed the worker silently and entered a secluded room on the second floor. The worker told Lin to wait for a while and left. After a while, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s walked in. He didn't know his actual age, but the first impression he gave was that this man had a steady temperament that came from living in the world. This was all the result of time. "Come, have a seat. I am Kai Zhongyang. Are you two here to see a doctor?" The man had a warm smile on his face. A doctor's heart was like a parent's. Although Kai Zhongyang was a businessman, he was still a doctor. He had the heart to save people. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have been able to become Zhang Liju's disciple. He couldn't lie in front of a real person, and there were no other people around. He said directly, "I'm sorry, I'm not actually here to see a doctor. I have another request." "Oh, what do you mean?" Kai Zhongyang was slightly stunned. As the vice manager of the Five Elements Chamber of Commerce, he very rarely asked about business matters. Instead, he treated more patients and saved more people. Those that came to look for him were all for medical treatment, and there were very few other matters. Chapter 4096. Tong Zhong. Kai Zhongyang's eyes lit up, and the unfamiliarity between them disappeared instantly. His attitude toward Lin suddenly became warm. "Few people know about my friendship with Hong Zhong. He has always been cautious. Since he told you about this, it means he trusts you very much, young hero Lin." "You flatter me, Elder Kai. I've always been under Elder Hong's care." "I'm ashamed." He was happy. Judging from this person's behavior, his friendship with Hong Zhong should not be shallow, and it was not a simple acquaintance. "Young hero Lin, you're too modest. Hong Zhong is a real businessman. If he can take care of you, it means you can take care of him. It's mutual." Kai Zhongyang knew Hong Zhong well, and his comments were to the point. He laughed and said, "Young hero Lin, how do you know Hong Zhong? This guy has always been in the North Island. He came back a few days ago, and then he ran back to the North Island. I wanted to play chess with him, but I didn't have a chance to play chess with him. To tell you the truth, I'm a disciple of the 3 pavilions in the North Island, and I also met Elder Hong in the North Island. Recently, I came out to do a trial task, but something happened on the way, so I ended up in the Middle Island. Elder Hong asked me to come to Five Element Commerce for help. Elder Kai, Linny explained. I see. Well, Hong Zhong has never been polite to me. Who's this lady next to him? Kai Zhongyang turned to ask. Sydney and Lin looked at each other, and she said frankly, I'm Sydney. Nice to meet you, Elder Kai. Sydney? Why does this name sound so familiar? Kai Zhongyang was slightly stunned. Then, he carefully looked at Shui Li from head to toe. Then he suddenly realized something and said, if I'm not mistaken, the person who was wanted by the Snow Sword faction just now, could it be, that's right, it's the two of us. Now that things had come to this, it was obviously useless to try to conceal or deny it, so they could only admit it. The only thing that Lin needed to be concerned about now was whether Kai Zhongyang's character was reliable or not. To this, Kai Zhongyang only nodded his head in understanding. He did not have any strange expression and said to Lin and Li Yundong, you don't have to worry. Since you are friends of that old guy Hong Zhong, then you are also friends of me, Kai Zhongyang. Although the Snow Sword School is not small, it is not something that my Five Elements Commerce cares about. I'm still a disciple of Grandmaster Zhang Liju. Even if they had 10 guts, they wouldn't dare come here to search. You guys can stay here. Many thanks, Elder Kai. Lin, he was taken aback for a moment before he hurriedly thanked him along with Sydney. He didn't expect this person to be so loyal and bear the burden for him without saying anything. Moreover, looking at his eyes, it didn't seem fake. But what surprised Lin even more was that he was actually Zhang Liju's disciple. Was that her senior brother or junior brother? Haha, you're too courteous, young Master Lin. This is just a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. Come, this old man will have someone arrange a superior room for you. Both of you don't look too well, so you should take a good rest first. Kai Zhongyang immediately found a superior room for the two of them and sent them to their room. I still have something to take care of. You two rest first. We'll have dinner together tonight. Lin watched as Kai Zhongyang left. Only then did Lin and Sydney return to their room. Although they were still a little worried, it seemed that this friend that Hong Zhong introduced to them was still reliable. Of course, wasn't the time to completely relax yet. If what Kai Zhongyang said was true, that he could easily protect the two of them, then half of the problem of being wanted by the Snow Sword School would be solved. Just as the two of them sat down in the room, they heard a loud noise coming from downstairs. Even with Shui Li's strength of heaven-level full completion, she could clearly sense what was happening downstairs. Sure enough, the disciples of the Snow Sword faction were here to look for someone. With a wanted poster in hand, the leading disciple of the Snow Sword School looked at the customers and workers of Five Elements Commerce and said loudly, anyone who knows where these two are, as long as you report it, you will be rewarded with 1,000 spirit jades. Has anyone seen them before? The entire crowd quietened down. Although the Five Elements Chamber of Commerce was the #1 leading chamber of commerce in the Merchant Union, those who came here to purchase pills were not necessarily local tycoons. As long as they made a report, they would be able to obtain 1,000 spirit jades. To most people, this temptation was still very big. However, temptation was one thing. If they didn't have any concrete information, no one would answer. After all, the Snow Sword School wasn't a small sect. Normal people wouldn't have the guts to lie to them. Has no one seen them before? A whole 1,000 spirit jades. There are so many people here. Could it be that no one has seen them before? The leading disciple of the Snow Sword School shouted again. At this moment, Kai Zhongyang's voice suddenly came from the top of the stairs. Snow Sword faction is truly awe-inspiring. You even came to my Five Elements Chamber of Commerce to arrest people. This old man would like to ask, who exactly gave you the courage to openly interfere with my Five Elements Chamber of Commerce's business? With such a big accusation on them, all the disciples of the Snow Sword School shrunk their necks. The leading disciple was even more shocked. He stammered, No. Vice Shopkeeper Kai, please don't be angry. We were just asking casually. Are you done asking now? Are you still not going to scram? Or do you want me to send you off personally? Kai Zhongyang scolded with a cold face. He wouldn't care about this kind of thing normally. However, now that it involved Lin, and Su Li, it was a different matter. Yes, yes. We'll scram now. We'll scram now. The disciples of the Snow Sword School nodded and bowed. They didn't even dare to let out a fart. They just left with their tails between their legs. They weren't willing to do this kind of thing in the first place. These top chambers of commerce were all very powerful, especially a giant like Five Elements Commerce, which had the support of the Middle Island Pill Hall. They wouldn't care about the Snow Sword School at all. This time, he was just going through the motions to give his master an explanation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to ask for trouble. Moreover, they had never thought that they would be able to find someone in a place like Five Elements Commerce. Naturally, they wouldn't dare and wouldn't go against Kai Zhongyang for this. What happened downstairs was clearly imprinted in Lin Yi's perception. Only then did he finally relax. This friend of Hong Zhong, Kai Zhongyang, was indeed a trustworthy and reliable person. He could finally stay in peace for a short period of time. He didn't need to hide anymore. Chapter 4097. Now. Sydney couldn't help but be stunned. In the past 6 months, she had been dreaming of breaking through to the Juji realm almost every day, but she had never met this condition, let alone had this opportunity. She didn't know how to react to Lin Yi's sudden words. Lin Yi smiled and took out a supreme grade foundation-building pill from his arms, which he had refined for Hong Zhong last time on the northernmost island. At that time, he didn't auction all of them, but kept some for himself. Now he took them out and gave them to Sydney. This is a foundation-building pill. Sydney was shocked when she saw it. Although she was only at the peak of the Heaven Stage, she had been on the Heaven Stage island for a long time. She knew what a foundation-building pill was, which was an important pill to help people break through to the Juji realm. Even the Snow Sword School, a sect on the Middle Island, wouldn't give it to their disciples casually. She didn't expect that Lin Yi would take one out casually, and it seemed to be of the supreme grade. Yes, you can build your foundation as soon as possible after taking it, and you will have more power to protect yourself so that you won't be bullied by any Tom, Dick, or Harry in the future, Lin Yi said with a smile. Well, okay. Sydney had long regarded herself as Lin Yi's woman, so she didn't stand on ceremony and directly took the supreme grade foundation-building pill. Her only thought now was that she didn't misjudge him. No matter where this man went, he was destined to be a strong man. He had only been on the Heaven Stage Island for more than half a year, and his strength had improved by leaps and bounds to the peak of the late stage of Juji realm. What was more exaggerated was that even Wei Xinjin, who was at the early stage of Gold Core, was defeated by him. If this was spread out, it would really shock the world. Of course, what shocked Sydney even more was Lin Yi's connections. He was far away in the North Island, but he had acquaintances in the Middle Island, and it was a top force like Five Elements Commerce. Moreover, it seemed that his connections were absolutely reliable and wouldn't betray him. This made Sydney feel that. It was not without reason that Lin Yi could go from a rogue cultivator in the secular world to an existence that all the ancient sects were afraid of. Perhaps, one day, Lin Yi would also have a place in the Middle Island, where there were so many masters. After adjusting her state, she took the supreme grade foundation-building pill. Then, Lin Yi personally taught Sydney how to run the true qi in her body and guided her step by step to break through to the foundation. Shueli was not inferior to the others in terms of foundation and talent. Now, with the help of the supreme grade foundation elixir and Lin Yi's guidance, breaking through to the foundation realm was a piece of cake. There weren't any problems during the process. Yan stage, I huang ti, Lin I through by Lin ti huang ta, Yan ti ti to chen huang ti since Lin by a Lin to Tian to say Ming to. The desire to break through to the foundation establishment realm had accumulated in her heart for such a long time. However, in the past half a year, there was no need to talk about success. There was not even the slightest bit of improvement. It had always been so out of reach. Now that he had met Lin Yi, it had only been a day, but he had directly achieved it in one go. Isn't this a little too unbelievable? Of course. You're now a true early-stage foundation establishment expert. However, things are going to be a bit troublesome from now on. Lin Yi smiled. He furrowed his brows slightly. What happened? Sydney's heart immediately tightened. She thought that something had gone wrong in the process of breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. There were repercussions. Do you have the rest of the mantra for Snow Valley? Linny asked. No. Sydney was stunned. Me neither. Linny shrugged helplessly and said worriedly, so the problem now is that you become an early-stage foundation establishment expert, but there's no way for you to continue cultivating. This. Sydney finally recovered from the joy of breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. She realized her awkward situation and didn't know what to do for a while. Although it was beautiful to break through to the foundation establishment stage, the strength of the early stage foundation establishment stage was not enough in the heavenly stage island, especially in the middle island. She still couldn't escape the fate of being cannon fodder. The rest of the mantra was a crucial problem. There was no room for carelessness. Sydney had just succeeded in building her foundation and had not stabilized yet. If she couldn't cultivate for a long time, not only would she not be able to improve further, her strength might even fall back to the heavenly stage realm. Then, she would be wasted. Actually, it's not that there's no way. Although the cultivation mantra is treasured by the big sects, as long as you go out and look for it, you should be able to buy it. The biggest problem now is that the mantra you buy might not be suitable for you to cultivate. Lin analyzed. Since he did not have the original Shugu follow-up cultivation method, then he could only find other cultivation methods to continue cultivating. However, the cultivation methods had always been different from each other. Once the follow-up cultivation method conflicted with the original cultivation method, the lightest consequence would be Qigong deviation, and the worst consequence would be death on the spot. Other than some special reasons, there were very few people in the cultivation world who would change their cultivation mantra midway. It was also because of this consideration. Sydney thought for a while and said, Actually, when I first came here, the big sects in the Middle Island did a constitution and mantra test for us, the experts in the secular world. They said that I was born with a body of ice, which was very compatible with the Snow Sword Faction's mantra. That was why I was brought to the Snow Sword Faction. In the past half a year, the reason why Sydney always had high hopes for the Snow Sword Faction was because of this. As long as she could cultivate the Snow Sword Faction's mantra like the normal disciples, even if it was the most basic, she believed that she would not be any worse than the others. However, she didn't expect that fate would make a fool out of her. After becoming Situ Qian's maid, she didn't even have the chance to cultivate normally, let alone the Snow Sword Faction's mantra. In that case, we just need to find a way to get the Snow Sword Faction's mantra, right? Lin Yi's eyes brightened. Sydney nodded. However, she said helplessly, that is true, but the Snow Sword Faction is a big sect on the Middle Island. The mantra is the foundation of the sect. It is a secret that cannot be passed on. It is impossible for it to be leaked, and it is even more impossible for us to buy it. That is a problem. However, there is always a way. Since we have found the direction, we will be able to find a way to solve it. We just need to spend a bit more time thinking about it, Linny comforted. As the saying went, money could make the gods move. As long as he did not lack spiritual jades, he would definitely be able to get the Snow Sword Faction's mantra for Sydney. At that moment, Kai Zhongyang's voice suddenly came from the door. What exactly is troubling the two of you? Do you need my help? Chapter 4098. Such a small matter is not worth mentioning. Those people from the Snow Sword School treated you too like that. Do you think I should be nice to them? Kai Zhongyang said with a smile. However, his gaze soon stopped on Sydney. He said in surprise, Lady Sydney was only at the peak of Heaven Realm before. It hasn't even been half a day, and you've already reached Foundation Establishment? You're truly a heaven-sent genius. Congratulations. Elder Kai is too kind. This is all thanks to Linny. Without his guidance and the Foundation Establishment pills, I wouldn't even be able to reach Foundation Establishment, let alone succeed, Sydney explained. You two are not ordinary people, so don't be too modest. Kai Zhongyang nodded with a smile. Since Lin Yi was Hong Zhong's friend, it was not strange at all that he had foundation establishment pills. After a pause, Kai Zhongyang continued. When I was at the door, I heard you two mention the mental cultivation method of the Snow Sword School. Are you two troubled by this? That's right. Lin Yi and Sydney looked at each other. For what they had seen before, this vice shopkeeper was someone they could rely on. There was no need to hide it from him. In that case, please wait a moment. I'll be back soon. Kai Zhongyang smiled mysteriously. He turned and left the room, leaving Lin Yi and Sydney looking at each other. After a while, Kai Zhongyang returned with a simple but exquisite scroll. He smiled and handed it to Lin Yi. This is? Lin Yi took it and opened it. His eyelids twitched, and he said in surprise, Snow Sword Mental Cultivation Method? Elder Kai, why do you have this? He was just thinking about how to get his hands on the Snow Sword School's mental cultivation method, and Kai Zhongyang just turned around and gave it to him. He was just about to doze off when someone sent him a pillow. Kai Zhongyang laughed. Master Lin, have you forgotten? My Shifu is a Dan-god. Even the heads of these sects, including the Snow Sword School, have to be humble when they ask for my Shifu's help. My Shifu owns the 5 elements commerce, and he doesn't lack spirit jade. If you want him to concoct pills, you'll have to exchange rare resources. Other than those rare treasures, the rest are the mental cultivation methods of the sections. Lin, he was secretly speechless. The sect masters of Middle Island sects, which one of them wasn't a ruthless character who could shake the world with a stomp of their feet. In the end, they all had to be so humble in front of his cheap master. It could be seen that when one's alchemy skills reached the level of the pill god, they could eat both big and small. But no matter what, this mental cultivation method was the top secret of the sects, and it wasn't easy for Zhang Liju to get it. He didn't believe that the Snow Sword School didn't have any other treasures, and the only reason was that Zhang Liju wanted this. Kai Zhongyang continued, My Shifu came back a while ago, and he gave me some of the rare treasures he got in recent years. He asked me to be in charge of these rare resources and prepare for the upcoming Middle Island Auction Festival. Middle Island Auction Festival? Lin Yi paused. In his mind, he couldn't help but think of the 4 Islands Auction Festival in the far North Island. Have you never heard of it, Master Lin? The so-called Central Island Auction Festival is a large-scale auction that all the chambers of commerce on the Central Island can participate in. It's officially organized by the Central Island Master and the Council of Elders. It's already the highest standard auction festival among the 5 Great Islands. Kai Zhongyang explained patiently. Every item in this auction is a rare treasure. My Shifu gave me this Snow Sword School mental cultivation method in preparation for this. I see. Lin, he was fascinated by it. Any cultivator would be tempted by this kind of top auction where treasures gathered. However, he could only think about it for now. After all, he had to find a way to get back to the North Island, and he didn't know if he could make it in time. After a pause, Lin Yi suddenly pointed at the Snow Sword mental cultivation method in his hand and asked curiously, Elder Kai, since this was prepared for this, how are you going to auction it if you give it to me now? Kai Zhongyang looked at Lin Yi strangely and smiled. It won't spoil even if I look at it. You could just take a copy and give it back to me later, right? Ah, that works? Lin Yi and Sydney froze. Haha, the core mental cultivation method is the secret of each sect. Even if the Snow Sword School gave it to my master, they definitely won't allow anyone to copy it. Even if they win it in the auction, they won't allow anyone to copy it. That's the rule of the Jianghu. But rules are dead. Master Lin, you're Hong Zhong's friend, so of course I have to let you off the hook. Kai Zhongyang said with a sigh. Hong Zhong and I are friends who have gone through life and death together. We saved each other's lives when we were young. So how could we be restricted by these rules? Lin Yi nodded. It turned out that the two of them were friends who had gone through life and death together. No wonder Kai Zhongyang was so protective of him. Indeed, it was just as he had said. Under normal circumstances, the core mental cultivation methods of the various sects were not allowed to be copied. Not only would the sects pursue this matter if it was spread out, but even if one did not consider this risk, No matter who had spent a huge price to bid for this mental cultivation method, they would definitely hide it. Others might not even be able to take a look at it, let alone copy it. If it weren't for this rule of the Jianghu, if it weren't for the fact that everyone was selfish and liked to keep it a secret, the cultivation methods of all the sects would have been passed down for hundreds and thousands of years, and they would have been spread all over the street. They would not be as rare as they were now. They would not be like the ordinary mental cultivation methods in the secular world in the North Island, which were everywhere. The truly profound mental cultivation methods were extremely rare. In that case, I won't stand on ceremony with you. Elder Kai, Lin, he said immediately. Although he didn't like to owe people favors, this snow sword mental cultivation method was very important to Sydney. Since Kai Zhongyang had already given it to him, there was no reason to refuse it. He could only think of a way to make it up to him in the future. What's more, apart from the relationship with Hong Zhong, he and Kai Zhongyang had another closer relationship, which was that they were fellow disciples of the same sect. Even if it wasn't time for them to recognize each other, there was no need to be too polite. He handed the snow sword mental cultivation method to Sydney and asked her to copy it on the side. Lin Yi and Kai Zhongyang prepared a table of good dishes and wine and sat together to chat. Although there was a huge age gap between them, they were both masters of alchemy and had unique medical skills. Whatever they said was a common topic. For a while, they chatted happily. They regretted not meeting each other earlier and became real friends despite their age difference. Chapter 4099. If everything went according to plan, once he reunited with Zhang Liju, this cheap master of his would become his biggest support on Sky Class Island. It wouldn't be a bad idea to know more about him before that. Although he had heard of Zhang Liju's legendary deeds from other people, those were mostly rumors passed down from mouth to mouth. It wasn't as reliable as the words of people close to him, like Kai Zhongyang. Man, I'm just a disciple in name. I'm not a proud disciple. Kai Zhongyang shook his head with a smile. A disciple in name is still a proud disciple. Otherwise, why would he give you resources like the snow sword arts, Elder Kai? Could it be that Grandmaster Zhang has a lot of direct disciples? Lenny probed. Direct disciples? Kai Zhongyang raised an eyebrow. Speaking of this, my master is quite unconventional. At his level, which of the other big shots didn't have disciples everywhere? Only my master is different. Not to mention direct disciples. He doesn't even have many disciples in name. He doesn't accept people easily. Oh, Grandmaster Zhang is such a legend, and he doesn't even have a direct disciple? Lin, he couldn't help but be curious. Only direct disciples could be the true inheritors of the legacy. Could it be that his cheap master had lost all hope and had even accepted something like a master's legacy? Speaking of this, my master did say something ambiguous before, saying that he should have a direct disciple in the common world. Kai Zhongyang suddenly said, "Should?" Lenny paused. Kai Zhongyang smiled bitterly. That's what my master said, and us disciples were all confused. If he did, then he did. If he didn't, then he didn't. What did this should mean? But my master didn't say much, and we didn't ask. It's become an unsolved mystery in the Hall of Elixir now. At this point, Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know how he did it, but judging from Li Ju's words, he already knew that Lin Yi had received his inheritance in the common world. It was just that he couldn't confirm it before they met face to face. Lin Yi suddenly remembered. The people who came after Zhang Liju's tomb, could it be, although he already understood, Lin Yi didn't show it on his face. Instead, he changed the subject. Elder Kai, you're the vice manager of 5 Elements Commerce. I wonder if you could help me get some heart-devouring, exquisite grass and life-growing mushrooms? The life mushroom is a little more difficult, but the heart-devouring, exquisite grass is not a problem. I will get someone to look in the warehouse. The Chamber of Commerce might not have it, but most of them are ready-made elixirs. However, the pill hall should have it. Kai Zhongyang was very straightforward and agreed without hesitation. Many thanks, Elder Kai. Lin, he said gratefully. He had only casually asked about the life mushroom, and the heart-devouring exquisite grass was naturally used to refine the foundation-building pill. This wasn't just for himself. More importantly, it was for Sydney. Lenny himself was already at the peak of the late phase of foundation building, and he had just broken through not too long ago. He wouldn't be able to use it for a while. However, Sydney's strength was simply too weak. She didn't even have the ability to protect herself. If he didn't increase her strength as soon as possible, if anything were to happen in the future, it could easily lead to a tragedy. The Snow Sword practitioner's arts were already in place, and with the foundation-building pill, with Snow Sword's talent, breaking through quickly shouldn't be a problem. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. The Snow Sword School had mobilized all of their forces to put Ling, Yi, and Sydney on the wanted list. However, it was as if the two had vanished from the face of the earth. Not only were they unable to find them, but there wasn't even a single report of them being seen. Logically speaking, since they had already given out a reward of 1,000 spirit jades, if someone saw it, they would definitely report it to the Snow Sword School. In the end, after 3 days, not even a single person had come. Helpless, the Snow Sword School could only give up for now. They were a huge school, especially in a place like the Middle Island, where dragons and tigers resided. They had all sorts of important matters to attend to every day. They couldn't possibly waste so much manpower for a mere servant girl who had eloped and escaped. As for Wei Shinjin, although he hated Ling, Yi, and Sydney to the bone, he didn't have the energy to look for them every day. He had already released the news of his wedding. If he continued to delay it, he would only become a laughingstock. Now that the arrow was already knocked on the bow, he had no choice but to marry Situ Qian. In any case, the invitation that he had sent out previously only stated that he, Wei Shenjin, was going to marry a Dao companion. However, it didn't specify who it was. It only said that she was a disciple of the Snow Sword School. Although Sydney had run away, the remaining Situ Qian just so happened to meet this condition and could take her place. Strictly speaking, Wei Shenjin didn't really like Situ Qian. It could only be said that she was a disciple of the Snow Sword School. Although Sydney had run away, the remaining Situ Qian just so happened to meet this condition and could take her place. But now, Wei Shenjin was forced to the point where he had no other choice. He could only use this method. The only thing that comforted him was that Situ Qian's conditions were not bad. Although she wasn't as pretty as Sydney, her appearance wasn't bad either. More importantly, Situ Qian had a strong background. In the Snow Sword School, Wei Shenjin's only backing was the Great Elder. Furthermore, they only had a slight relationship, which couldn't be compared to Situ Qian, the Great Elder's granddaughter. After marrying Situ Qian, not only would he be able to bring home a beauty, his position in the Snow Sword School would also rise. He would become a core disciple that was truly relied upon. It could be considered as killing 2 birds with 1 stone. As for Ling, Yi, and Sydney, no matter how unwilling Wei Shenjin was, he could only put them aside for the time being. It was impossible for the Snow Sword School to continue wasting so much manpower. The past 3 days had already proven that it was impossible to capture someone just by relying on the arrest warrant. If they wanted to obtain an immediate effect, they would have to invite the law enforcement hall of the Middle Island to make a public arrest. It was a pity that the influence of the Snow Sword School was not strong enough to do that. Young hero Lin, let me tell you a piece of good news. The arrest warrant from the Snow Sword School has been removed. Kai Zhongyang quickly brought this news to Lin, Yi, and Ling Yi. Really? That's great. Lin Yi and Sydney were instantly overjoyed. Even if this did not mean that the Snow Sword School had completely let them go, at least they could move around more freely in the future. They did not need to be cooped up in this room, unable to go out. Chapter 4100. After a pause, Kai Zhongyang said, "Oh yes, young Master Lin, I've got the news about the heart-devouring, exquisite grass you asked me to find. Although I haven't found it in the Chamber of Commerce or the Alchemy Hall, some trial teams have gone to collect it. They'll be back in a few days." Just wait patiently for a while. Okay. Thank you for your trouble, Elder Kai. Lin Yi nodded happily. In the past 3 days, the thing that troubled him the most was how to arrange a place for Sydney in the future. He definitely couldn't go back to Snow Sword School, but it was unrealistic to ask Sydney to follow him back to the North Island. Even if Lin Yi had a relationship with Shangwan Tianhua, it would be very difficult to arrange a place for Sydney to enter the 3 pavilions, especially when Shangwan Tianhua mistakenly thought that there was something going on between him and Shangwan Laner. If he suddenly brought back a super beauty as Shangwan Laner's grandfather, no matter how open-minded he was, he might have to have a good talk with Lin Yi about his life ideal. If it didn't work, he could only ask Ning Shuefei to find a way to take Shui Li to the West Island. It was a gathering place for female cultivators. With the help of Ning Shuefei, the little princess, Shui Li should have a good life there. However, this was the last resort. After all, if he wanted to do this, Lin Yi had to take Sydney back to the North Island first. Not only would Shangwan Tianhua know, but the dangers they would encounter along the way were already a big problem that couldn't be solved. Sydney's current strength was really too weak. Moreover, when he took Sydney back, it was already unknown whether Ning Shuefei would still be in the North Island. After all, so many days had passed, and Ning Shuefei just came out to play with Shangwan Laner. It was unlikely that she would stay in the North Island all the time. After pondering for a while, Lin Yi suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and another familiar and beautiful face appeared in his mind. Tian Chan. Last time they parted in a hurry on the far North Island, Lin Yi didn't know how she was now. This unexpected trip to Middle Island was unexpected for Lin Yi, but since he was already here, he must find a way to see Tian Chan. Elder Kai, you're the vice manager of 5 Elements Commerce and Grandmaster Zhang's in-name disciple. You're a member of Nakajima's Hall of Alchemy. Do you know Tian Chan? She is also a disciple of the Pill Hall. Lin Yi asked. Tian Chan? Young hero Lin, if you were to ask other normal Pill Hall disciples, this old man might not necessarily know them. After all, there are so many Pill Hall disciples, and this old man is always at the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, so I don't spend much time there. However, this Tian Chan is an exception. Oh, why is that? Lin Yi was puzzled. Hey, this old man knows her because there's been an uproar about something related to her recently. Everyone in the Middle Island Dan Hall, including the entire 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, knows about it, so this old man has also heard of it. Kai Zhongyang said, What is it? Elder Kai, tell me quickly. Lin Yi's heart tightened as he asked quickly. Although Tian Chan was not as miserable as Shui Li in Middle Island, she was still in a bad situation. She was alone, and no matter what happened, she would not be the one to benefit from it. It's a long story. The source has to start from the North Island. Kai Zhongyang immediately told Lin Yi everything he knew about Tian Chan. Finally, he sighed and said, This Tian Chan is also a girl with a hard life. She was forced to marry someone at such a young age. Heaven is really jealous of her beauty. Before he finished speaking, Kai Zhongyang's eyelids suddenly twitched. Then he saw that Lin Yi's body suddenly emitted an extremely violent aura. He was puzzled and secretly shocked. If he wasn't wrong, Lin Yi's strength should only be at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment. However, this aura, why did it feel like it was comparable to a beginner stage gold core expert? Zheng Dongjue, you old man. If I don't tear you into pieces in this life, I, Lin Yi, swear that I'm not a human. Lin Yi was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. He clenched his fists tightly and flew into a rage. With his personality, even if someone was stupid enough to provoke him, he would at most kill them. Normally, he wouldn't get angry at all, let alone lose control of his emotions like now. However, today, after hearing about Tian Chan's experience, Lin Yi completely lost control. This time, he accidentally came to Middle Island. First, he heard about Sydney's matter. Now, he learned about Tian Chan's miserable experience. How could Lin Yi not go berserk? Lin Yi calmed down first. Seeing this, Sydney quickly pulled him, for fear that he would lose control of his emotions and rush out. One must know that this was Middle Island, where experts gathered. Gold core experts were everywhere, and foundation establishment experts were like dogs. Once Lin he lost control and went berserk, he would definitely be the one to suffer. Young hero Lin, why are you so agitated? Kai Zhongyang looked at Lin Yi's reaction and couldn't help but feel strange. Tian Chan is the same as me. When we were in the secular world, she and Lin... Sydney had to explain with a blush. Although she didn't finish her words, Kai Zhongyang had already understood. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This Lin, he was really a romantic person. When he was in the secular world, he had so many beauties. This Sydney in front of him was already a first-class super beauty. He heard that Tian Chan was the same. The words femme fatale were really not wrong at all, especially on Heaven Stage Island where the strong preyed on the weak. Whether it was Sydney or Tian Chan, the reason why they attracted so much trouble was because they were too beautiful. However, Kai Zhongyang suddenly thought of his master. In fact, it was the same. He brought Master Bing and Master Shui from the secular world, and it seemed to have caused quite a stir in the beginning. Kai Zhongyang pondered for a moment, then said to Lin, Young hero Lin, it's not impossible for you to meet Tian Chan. My senior and junior brothers are all in the Pill Hall. We are all Master's nominal disciples, and we take care of each other. I can ask them for help and let you meet Tian Chan, really? Lin Yi's berserk aura stopped momentarily, and his mind slowly recovered from the rage. Kai Zhongyang nodded affirmatively and said, But you have to promise me one thing first. You can't be impulsive. My master is not in the Pill Hall now, and Zheng Dongjue is the most powerful deputy hall master. He is the person with the most power in the Pill Hall. If you want to challenge him with your current strength, you are courting death. Even I can't help you. Linny took a deep breath and lowered his head to calm down for a moment. Then, he nodded and agreed. Okay, I will listen to Elder Kai. Chapter 4101. Well, in a few days, I will take the opportunity of preparing for the auction of Zhongdao to go back to Alchemy Hall. At that time, young hero Lin, you can pretend to be my attendant. What do you think? Kai Zhongyang suggested. Thank you, old Kai. Lin, he was grateful from the bottom of his heart. Just because they were friends, Kai Zhongyang was willing to help him so much. He must remember this kindness and favor. Although he still had to wait for a few more days, Lin Yi's heart was full of expectation at the moment. Even though he had met her last time in the far North Island, after hearing what happened to Tian Chan recently, Lin Yi's mood to meet Tian Chan had become eager. As Lin Yi's woman, Sydney was not very jealous of this. Instead, she empathized with Tian Chan's experience. After all, wasn't she the same? She was the same, and so was Tian Chan. It seemed that the beautiful female cultivators from the secular world could not escape this disaster. She didn't know how Rock Candy was now. In the past, Shui Li and Rock Candy were sworn enemies in the secular world. But now that she thought about it, the so-called grudge between them was nothing. Sydney couldn't help but ask, By the way, Lin Yi, besides Tian Chan and me, who else did you find from the secular world? She was too embarrassed to point out that it was Rock Candy, but Linny understood what she meant. He shook his head and said, I have no news of these confidants except you and Tian Chan. But as for others, Zhong Pingliang, Kong Ming Ming, and Dongfang Badeo were all transmitted to the North Island like me and joined the 3 pavilions of the North Island. I see. Sydney couldn't help but be a little disappointed, but she still forced herself to comfort him. It's okay. I believe they will all be fine. As long as you are here, we will all be together again. Yes, I will. Lin nodded heavily, but the worry in his heart still lingered. It was only now that he found out about Sydney and Tian Chan. Furthermore, they were not in a good situation. Heaven knew how Han Jingjing and the other girls were doing right now. If he wanted to find them, he had to raise his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would not be able to move an inch no matter where he went. Middle Island Pill Hall. He came out of the room of the will of heaven. Tian Chan's expression was calm, but there was a hint of helplessness. After so long, the will of heaven was still the same as before, crazy and crazy. He still refused to admit himself. Now that things had come to this, Tian-chan no longer wished for the Heaven Path to acknowledge her. She only wished that she could do her best to take care of this elder who was related to her by blood. However, the Heaven Path would curse her every time they saw each other, and now it was only getting worse. What was she to do? At this moment, a figure flashed out from the darkness and stopped her. It was her brother-in-law in name, Zheng Tianchu. Sister-in-law, are you here to send medicine to Master Tian again? It's lonely to be alone. Let me accompany you next time. Zheng Tianchu's eyes glanced up and down at Tian-chan's exquisite body. Tian-chan frowned. There was a flash of disgust in her eyes. She didn't want to talk to him, but out of courtesy, she still endured the disgust and said, "No, I can do it alone. I don't know what else you want, young master." Zheng Tianchu didn't notice this. He took a step closer to Tian-chan and said with a frivolous smile, "I heard people say that Middle Island has not been peaceful recently. Recently, our Central Island has not been peaceful. 2 traitors escaped from the Snow Sword faction. One of them is a rapist. He has already taken away a female disciple of Snow Sword School. Sister-in-law, you have to be careful. Don't be tricked. Thank you for your concern, but this is Middle Island Pill Hall. No matter how blind the rapist is, it is impossible for him to come to such a place." Tian-chan took a step back calmly. Be that as it may, you still can't stop someone's lust, especially with such a beautiful woman like you here. That rapist might get hot-headed and come over. As the saying goes, even if one were to die under a peony, he would still be a romantic even if he became a ghost. Zheng Tianchu's smile became more and more frivolous, and he took another step forward. The meaning of flirting was obvious. In addition, there was no one around. Tian-chan knew that if she continued to pester like this, the other party might have lustful thoughts and make a move. At that time, it would be difficult to deal with it. Tian-chan immediately turned cold and frowned. "Young master, you worry too much. If there is nothing else, please let me go. I have to go back first." "Oh, sister-in-law, don't be so anxious. Anyway, no one will accompany you when you go back. You are in the prime of your life. It is the time to have fun, but you stay alone in your room. Don't you think it is boring?" Zheng Tianchu did not give up. Not only did he not let her go, but he reached out to touch Tian-chan's face. Tian-chan quickly avoided and warned with a cold face. Men and women should not touch each other. "I am your sister-in-law. Young master, please behave yourself." "Sister-in-law, don't be so serious." Zheng Tianchu suddenly laughed and looked up and down at Tian-chan. His eyes were full of obscenity. He chattered on, "People say that women need a man's nourishment to stay young and beautiful. Although you're my sister-in-law and my cousin's woman, my cousin is dead now. He doesn't have the ability to nourish you. But now that I have inherited his position, I naturally have to fulfill the corresponding responsibility. What do you say, sister-in-law?" Such explicit and shameless words really made Tian-chan angry. When they first met, Zheng Tianchu was frivolous, but at least he still maintained the last bit of bottom line. But now, as her position in Zheng Dongjue's eyes was gradually consolidated, his behavior began to become more unscrupulous. After several encounters, Tian-chan had a deep understanding of Zheng Tianchu's shameless nature. The more she pestered him, the more excited he became, and the more he wanted to take a yard when given an inch. "Young master, does her grandfather know that you are doing this?" Tian-chan snorted coldly and immediately ignored him. She turned sideways and directly walked around him. You still want to play chastity with me? Interesting, I want to see how long you can last." Looking at Tian-chan's graceful back, Zheng Tianchu's eyes suddenly flashed a trace of ruthlessness. Although he had always coveted his sister-in-law, his patience was always limited. Now his patience was almost exhausted. A few days later, Lin Yi finally received the exact news from Kai Zhongyang. He had already discussed with the senior at the Dan Hall. Now that everything was ready, he could bring Lin Yi to see Tian-chan. Chapter 4102. This time, he showed up with his original appearance. After all, the appearance of Wu Fu with the 1,000 silk mask had been plastered all over the street. Although the Snow Sword faction had withdrawn the wanted order, there were too many people on the street. It was hard to guarantee that no one would notice him. It was better to show his original appearance. Anyway, no one in the Middle Island would be able to recognize him. The Middle Island Pill Hall was one of the top sects in Middle Island. Whether it was status or influence, it was an outstanding existence. This could be seen just from its geographical location. Middle Calder Mountain was located in the center of Middle Island. Not only did it represent the highest mountain in Middle Island, but its unique location and environment also nurtured a large number of legendary realm experts. According to records, the earliest batch of cultivators on Heaven Island settled down in Middle Calder Mountain. After thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, the cultivation world on Heaven Island was prosperous. Middle Calder Mountain's high status on Heaven Island was undeniable. Settling down in Middle Calder Mountain not only meant that one could occupy coveted cultivation resources, but more importantly, it represented an unparalleled transcendental status on Middle Island. Even those powerful sects that could establish a foothold on Middle Island, including the Snow Sword faction, had never been able to reach the core area of Middle Calder Mountain. There were no more than 5 transcendental forces that could enter Middle Calder Mountain in the entire Heaven Island, and the Middle Island Pill Hall was one of them. Following Kai Zhongyang all the way to the entrance of the Middle Island Pill Hall, Lin Pham looked at the quaint, tranquil, and beautiful paradise inside, and then looked at the bustling scene outside. It was just a door away, but there was such a stark contrast. Even Lin, he couldn't help but sigh when he saw it. This feeling of serenity in the midst of chaos reminded Lin of a saying in the secular world. It was said that those who could live in a courtyard house in the core area of Yinjing were the big shots. The wonderful scene in front of him. Wasn't that the case before? The layout of the Middle Island Pill Hall was like a super villa with an exquisite structure. Other than a few large doors, there were quiet and elegant pavilions connected to each other at almost every location. They were all intertwined and looked magnificent. He passed through one door after another without any obstruction. However, there were no guards in sight. It was the complete opposite of what he had expected. Lin, he couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Elder Kai, has the Nakajima Alchemy Hall always been like this? Why aren't there any guards? A place like the Pill Hall." Whether it was ready-made elixirs or elixir materials, they were all treasures that made people's hearts pound. No matter how famous the Middle Island Pill Hall was, in the face of benefits, it was hard to guarantee that people wouldn't take risks out of desperation. This was human nature, and it couldn't be stopped. Kai Zhongyang smiled and said, "Young hero Lin, there's something you don't know. Don't be fooled by the fact that we didn't see any guards along the way. This place is loose on the outside, but tight on the inside. Those guards are just hiding in the dark. He just didn't want outsiders to see it. The security of our Pill Hall is second to none, even in all of the 5 great islands of the Heaven Stage. The reason why they didn't come to interrogate you is because I got someone to specially inform them earlier." "I see." Lin, he finally understood. If the security was really as loose as it looked, then in the Heaven Stage Island where the strong preyed on the weak, the Middle Island Pill Hall wouldn't have such a high position today. Moments later, Lin followed Kai Zhongyang to a small manor deep in the core. Compared to the outside, the environment here was better, and there were very few people. There wasn't even a normal disciple passing by. Seeing that Lin, was curious. Kai Zhongyang turned around and introduced, "This garden is an area specially reserved for the disciples under our master. Other normal disciples don't have the right to enter or exit here. Even the vice head has to inform us if he wants to enter or exit here." Lin nodded. Zhang Liju was the one who created the Middle Island Pill Hall, and it wasn't strange for his disciples to have this privilege. At this time, a young man walked over and smiled at the two. "Brother Kai, you guys are here. Is this the Lin you told me about?" Lin turned around and looked at Kai Zhongyang. He smiled and nodded. "That's right, this is Lin. Young hero Lin, this is Ho Guanqi. He's the same as me, a disciple under Master's name. But don't look at him just because he looks young. He's our big disciple, be it talent or strength. He's the highest among us, and the one that Master values the most. I'm Lin E. Nice to meet you, Senior Ho. Lin E quickly greeted. The guy looked so young, it felt weird to call him Elder Ho. He might not like it, but he couldn't call him Big Disciple directly. He could only call him Senior for now. Lin E, don't be nervous. I've known Hong Zhong for a long time, and I've heard about your situation from Kai Zhongyang. I'll do my best to help. Ho Guanqi had a friendly smile on his face as he patted Lin Yi's shoulder. That's right. I was able to bring you here successfully because of Big Disciple Ho's help. Otherwise, even I wouldn't be able to bring people back so casually. After all, this is an important place for the Pill Hall. Unless it's a disciple of our sect, outsiders aren't allowed to enter. Kai Zhongyang explained. Thank you, Senior Ho. Lin Yi said gratefully. Then he couldn't contain the excitement in his heart and asked impatiently, when can I see Tian-chan? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and smiled. Then he said to Lin, my friend, you're really infatuated. Don't worry, I promise that you'll get what you want. However, we need to keep this a secret. We can't go to Tian-chan directly. We need to find a compromise. A compromise? Lin Yi was slightly stunned. He knew that if he went to see Tian-chan directly, it would be easy for people to notice him. With Tian-chan's current sensitive identity, it wouldn't be good for her. That's right. I've heard of something that can be put to use. Ho Guanqi nodded and said, I've heard that Tian-chan has been visiting Elder Tian a lot lately. Every few days, she would go there. So, if we spread the word that we found an alchemist to treat Elder Tian, people won't care about it. But if Tian-chan hears about it, she'll definitely go there. That's right. Let Tian-chan take the initiative to go over. It's better than us looking for her. That way, young hero Lin, you and Tian-chan will only have a chance encounter and won't be noticed by others. Kai Zhongyang agreed. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.